and gentlemen, here it is, the most listened to radio show on the planet. Even the other stations are tuned in too.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? My name is Clint Novak, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast.
Hi, this is Chuck, and you're listening to Coaster Challenge podcast.
Hi, I'm Evan Ponstingle, the author of Kings Island, A Ride Through Time. You're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast.
Hi, this is Jeremy from Buckeye Coasters, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast.
Hey guys, it's Logan from Coaster Kids, and you're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast.
Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? Yes, I accept the Coaster Challenge. Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? Coaster Challenge podcast is here. It's time to face your fears. Get that theme park therapy and lend us both your Coaster Challenge podcast is here. Your fear can disappear. We know that theme park therapy can dry up all your tears. Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? Yes, I accept the Coaster Challenge. Do you accept the Coaster Challenge? We accept because you know we're not average.
You're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast. A journey where people become fearful to fearless, all from riding roller coasters. So please, secure your hats and glasses, and keep your hands and arms inside the podcast. It's time to accept the Coaster Challenge with your hosts, Andrew Locke.
Hey everyone, this is Andrew, one of the executive producers of the Coaster Challenge podcast. Before we get to today's interview, I want to share some exciting news about one of our guests and friends of the show, of the podcast, Ben Grant, who is one of our first guests in season 2. You might remember him. He specializes in music and doing funny videos about the parks. Also works, or used to work at SeaWorld Orlando, here in Orlando, just a few minutes away from where I live, worked in entertainment there. Well, anyways, he no longer works at SeaWorld, at least not SeaWorld Orlando, because he just got a job with SeaWorld Abu Dhabi, the new SeaWorld park opening out there. We don't know what he's going to be doing there yet. I talk to him periodically, but he's very excited. He's already out there kind of working at the park, doing some stuff there, which he can't get into specifics of. But look forward to seeing his journey there as he starts working and his park opens to the public and so forth. We'll learn more about what he's doing there, and I'll share further updates. But again, we're thankful to Ben for not only being on season 2 of our podcast early on, but again, doing our awesome theme song, which we love so much. So good luck to you, Ben, out there in Abu Dhabi. I personally have been to Abu Dhabi. It's an awesome, awesome place, along with Dubai there in the United Arab Emirates. Great, great parks like Ferrari World and Wild Wadi and others. So many good parks, so many fun things to do out there. But in any case, let's move on to today's main event, which is our interview for today. So 2 aspects that are integral to coastering lives of many, many enthusiasts are counting credits and extensive travel, like places like Abu Dhabi, for example, to visit parks all around the world. So our guest today is an authority in both of these areas. And I can tell you that from personal experience. I know this guest very well. He's a personal friend of mine. I've spent a lot of time with him. And he's going to share some wisdom with us regarding these 2 things, especially the travel part. So I'd like to welcome to the podcast the one, the only Bradley Edholm. Welcome, Bradley.
Hello. Thank you, Andrew. For those who don't know, I work in sports television, and especially when extra sporting events, follow NBA playoffs, Stanley Cup playoffs, stuff like that happens, work just gets infinitely more hectic. So it's good to actually finally be on here. And for those who don't know, I'm probably one of the youngest people in the world with over 1,000 credits. I'm the crazy kid who just, I guess no longer a kid, crazy young adult who just rides, and yeah, counts credits because why not, I guess, anymore.
Thanks, Bradley, for the little intro there. Yeah, I know from talking to you, again, you and I have known each other now for several years and talk all the time and have hung out quite a bit, that you know, and this is something probably we'll talk about more later, but a lot of enthusiasts, you know, and perhaps some of the ones that are jealous of how many credits you have versus your age and all that, you know, they think that, you know, you're this crazy coaster guy that just all you do is obsess over coasters and ride coasters. And certainly you love coasters. But as you and I have talked about, as surprising as it may seem to those same enthusiasts who are jealous or whatnot, coasters are not your number one passion. It's sports, right?
That is 100% true. Now, I guess another part of me, I believe, I guess, in what you'd call I call it the pillars for me.
Yeah.
I have one pillar of my life that I relate to music. I'm a huge EDM fan, and that's something
nice.
at least I can enjoy. I'm just having a rough day. I'll just throw on a good EDM set, my headphones, and just jam out for an hour. I'm a huge sports fan, and that is both obviously working in it, but I get home from work. I just Saturdays in the fall, big college football guy. I wake up, weekday mornings to watch the Premier League, NBA and NHL. It's more come playoff time, but there's that. So that's like pillar 2. And then pillar 3 is roller coasters. Now, for me to actually be in my happy place, I want all 3 of them to be working in unison. I'm not relying on any one thing to give me happiness. And if anyone's asking, well, what about family? I view family as that's a given. That's not 1 to 3 pillars because it's the overarching part. That always is happiness. But those 3 pillars, if I rely, and I've had parts throughout my life, I overly rely on any one of those 3 to bring me happiness, it actually doesn't work. They all have to it's like checks and balances, how our government works, where they all work together to provide me happiness. And for most people, my socials come across more as just the coaster part, but those who really know me, sports, music, and then also gaming, which is just something to do on the side. All of those are also integral parts of my life. It's more than just roller coasters.
Sure. That makes sense. For me, it's a different P word. It's not pillars, but that totally makes sense. Again, I can relate. For me, it's passions or hobbies, passions. I have a number of hobbies, but the ones that are the biggest and most important to me are what I would call my passions. And for me, theme parks and coasters, sports cars, video games, travel, movies, cooking. I like cooking a lot. But I think the big passions are the travel, the coasters and parks, the sports cars. Technology is another big one too, which I kind of fold video games into. I like video games a lot as well. Don't have as much time for them with everything else I do, which is fine because I enjoy life, and that's the main thing. But yeah,
is actually just enjoy your life. It's do what makes you happy, as long as you're not harming other people.
Exactly. But to your point, my passions oftentimes do intersect with each other, or there's synergy between them, or convergence between them.
Same for me.
Yeah, and so the travel is a big thing along with the coasters and parks, and of course we'll be talking about travel today because of some of your, for the lack of a better term, your skills that I think would be good to share with our audience. But also along with that is, and this is kind of the travel component, is the sports car stuff. I'm not into sports car racing, although I've watched some of that. I do, and I guess enjoy that a little bit. It's more my own cars. And as time has gone by, I've gotten better about finding and getting the cars, because I only have one car at a time. I don't necessarily have a lot of cars like some people do, which is, either way is fine. But taking that car, whatever it may be, whatever I have, and integrating that into road trips where I travel and do parks. And I did a month-long road trip last year with my car. And so that was, and I got to enjoy my car and take it all over the place. And go to parks and see people and see friends, which is great too. I don't consider that a passion, but that's just part of my life that I enjoy, seeing people all over the country and all over the world, and friends that I have. But yeah, so that was coupling kind of multiple, basically 3 together: the travel, the cars, and the parks, and it was awesome. And I love doing that.
Speak on that.
Yeah.
For the last the entire month of December, I was out of town working sporting events. Country I was in. Spent half the time in North Carolina working with 2 soccer tournaments, the ACC championship and Call of Duty tournament, which was great because it's that mixed my sports TV skill set of work, but I was then covering video games, which then mixed both the sports love with the gaming love. I went to a few parks that were on the way, got a few of the credits I need in that part of the country that were open. I guess also should have added was in New Orleans and various parts of Texas. But it was okay, I'm mixing my work love. I'm making money while doing this, so you're covering all the bills. I'm riding coasters at the same time, and that's probably actually going to be my goal moving forwards. Is why I'm in sports television to some extent. I I never wanted to be in an office working a 9 to 5 job that would just drive me up a wall. Most people do it. I was fortunate enough. I found a job where I don't have to do that. It's opposite of most other people. It's more nights. It's when pretty much for anyone you think about, when you are not at work or at school, that's actually when I'd be working. When you are
right
at school or you're at work, like, a Tuesday afternoon, a Tuesday morning, I'll be at home.
Right. It's
But,
opposite schedule. Right.
Yeah, but it was a job that's now looking at it, the goals long term is, work the World Cup, work the Olympics. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to put 2 and 2 together. You love to travel, you want to go to weird places to ride roller coasters. Oh, but you're gonna already be there working the Olympics. You just spend a few days beforehand or a few days after to go to explore that part of the world, wherever the 2046 Olympics may be, for example, and then go ride the roller coasters there. And I'm killing 2 birds with 1 stone.
Right. Yeah, I can relate to a couple things kind of to unpack there, Bradley. So the first, you mentioned your travels in December to North Carolina. I mentioned my road trip earlier that I did, month-long road trip that was actually to the Northeast, to New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and certainly things on the way and the way there and the way back. But that's not the only road trip I did last year. I mean, I put better part 25,000 miles in 9 months on my new Model S, my new Tesla Model S that I took delivery of last year. Actually, right at the end of one of your visits down here with your mom. But I've done a lot of road trips with it, obviously, and not just that one. And in fact, the last big road trip I did with it is I took my buddy Sean from Orlando up to North Carolina for a Coaster Crew event there at Carowinds. And it was awesome.
It was completely unexpected, but just the way the world is. Things happen.
Small world. You guys are going to be in the area. You're going to be, and you told me you're going to be at the park that same day, not for that event, but the event basically ended by 6, and the park was open till 10. So we got some great night rides in Fury and hung out, and it was great seeing you guys, because you guys live in Colorado. I live in Orlando, so it's not like we see each other all the time. Yeah. But and this is not my only story I've had, where even meeting up with you guys. I met up with you guys in Ohio by chance. You guys were crossing the country, and we met up at Stricker's Grove along with Larry and Gene, good friends of mine that you guys finally got to meet. So twice last year, we just serendipity kicked in, and we were at the same place at the same time. And this happens to me all the time with other friends too. So yeah. And then the other thing you mentioned about, your goal, which is awesome, by the way, of traveling for work, covering sporting events, like you said, like the Olympics, the World Cup, which are international events. And then, hey, wherever you're at, wherever that may be, that event, riding coasters. I mean, I should do the math. It'd be a lot of work. I have now 540 credits. Of how many of those credits were obtained because of business travel for whatever company I was working for, where I went to a given place, Europe, Middle East, Asia, and then went to the parks there while I was on that business trip, on the weekend or on a free day. It wouldn't be majority of my credits, but it'd be a lot of them.
But it'd also be a fair amount of the unique credits.
Oh yeah.
It's a good chunk of your international credits, which is a
it
way to lower the cost of getting, because certain parts of the world, no matter how much research you do, they're not going to ever be that cheap to get to or that logical. You're gonna have to bite the bullet if you want to get to certain areas.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's come up with some of the guests we've had on previously, and friends that I've met, through Instagram, people that were interested in the podcast, or just started chatting with me on there. I love engaging with people. Some younger listeners, younger people, where they're trying to figure out what they should do for their careers. How can they travel and get credits, like we're talking about, while you're traveling for work and whatnot. Given that interest in travel, which is a key component to go into parks, because you just don't want to go to your home parks all the time, every single day. You want to get other coaster credits, go to the parks. The travel component's a big deal. Now, if you can't, travel for work, or you're not traveling right now, or you're not traveling to a given place you want to go to for work, but you really want to go to that place to go to a certain park, then that's where, and we'll talk about this later on in the interview, Bradley, I think where your skills come in terms of, being able to travel smartly, efficiently, inexpensively. Again, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a fun thing coming up in the interview. Now, you mentioned EDM, by the way, music. So, again, I know you pretty well. I've gotten to know you pretty well, but I didn't know that aspect of you.
I don't mention it very much because it doesn't come up in conversation. It's more something I guess I kind of at times keep to myself. Now I'll mention the Europe trip I did with Mark, Austin, and Justin.
Yes.
We were supposed to, but obviously COVID was still going. We were going to go to a EDM festival called Perukaville in Germany. We were going to go we were going to go to the festival. I think it starts at 2 p.m., but we were going to plan each day to go at 4 or 6 p.m. because the major people would want, at least I wanted to see, and when it gets really fun, there's a good atmosphere, everything. One start to 4 or 6. So the idea, and this shows how crazy aggressive I am with travel. We were going to go to Movie Park, Germany in the morning from 10 to 2, and then go to the EDM festival. The next day we were going to go to Toverland from 10 to 2, go to the EDM festival. The third day was going to be Efteling 10 to 5 EDM festival. We were going to still do parks in the day. We were just going to run ourselves ragged because the festival would end at 4 in the morning, so we were only going to be working sleep. But it is what it is. Right. Well, is everything you can. This will be a big part of how I travel, how I think, and I'll go more in depth later. Yeah. You can always make more money. You can't make more time. And most of the time when you go on trips, you have limitations of, I only have a week off of work, so we'll call that Monday to Friday. The Saturday and Sunday beforehand, Saturday and Sunday after. You've got 9 days. What can you do in 9 days? I want to get as much done as I possibly can in those 9 days. Right. And my parents taught me this when I was young, and I stick with it. They probably, they from their life experience, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Right. And I'll catch up on sleep when I'm done with the trip. I want to enjoy the trip and squeeze every minute I can out of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can definitely relate to that, Bradley. And we've talked about things like this before. And by the way, the trip you mentioned that you went on with Mark, Austin, and Justin, all good friends of yours and mine, great guys. That was back in 2020, right? So that was... Or 2021. That was 2021, yeah. You were going to do it in 2020.
I had plans internationally in 2020,
but then COVID. So you delayed it until the summer of 2021. That's right. Yeah. But still, especially in Europe, COVID was an issue, but you made it work. And of course, you guys probably more affected by the floods in Belgium, for example, that year that were tragic. And
I go yes and no, because it's we missed on Wallaby, Belgium, which Mark and Austin, they went this year, last year now, and dates are 2022. Yeah, 2023 yet, but they got it. Justin and I haven't yet, but for me, it's it was one coaster. I'd already been to the park. Yeah, it was a really good coaster, especially with G-force. But the bigger hindrance for me is I'm normally a person who likes to. I had everyone get the airfare for that trip about 11 months in advance because I just found a steal of a deal. It's $220 round trip. Most time, people can't even find a domestic flight from wherever they live to Florida for for $220. The flight to Europe in the middle of the summer, peak travel time for $220,
crazy.
But that shows I'm normally a year out on that. I normally go on. My mom's a loyal Hotels.com person. That's what I've stuck with. No, there's others, but it's hard. And kind of brand loyalty has its benefits.
Oh, sure. That's how I feel. Yeah.
So I book hotels 11 months out, and book most of those refundable just in case we switch our mind or readjust the trip. But most of the time, when you book months and months in advance on hotels, they're cheaper. You go months and months in advance on your car rental, it's cheaper. That trip, even though we were still on a good budget, we did go to the park tickets we could figure out. I still had us get, I got the airfare in advance. I still had us get the car rental way in advance, which saved us hundreds of dollars per person. All that type of stuff. Because we didn't know which countries were going to be open. We were booking hotels sometimes the day of, at best. We were booking hotels a week in advance. And I could tell compared to other times I had been to Europe, we were paying 20% extra, if not more, a night on hotels. I remember we had a huge issue in Poland. The cheapest hotel when I went, I got a hotel that was, for at least for what it was really nice. It slept 4 people. It was just my parents and I. It was like we were across the street from Auschwitz, way closer to Interlandia than we actually stayed. It was like $80. We couldn't even get like a remotely decent hotel, even within like 30 minutes of Interlandia, that was less than 200, for example.
Right.
Now it's because we couldn't plan in advance. And that to me was actually the bigger hindrance. We spent, I would go with maybe 25% extra total expense wise per person because we weren't able to take advantage of kind of Black Friday / Black November, the Christmas sales on park tickets. We couldn't buy our hotels in advance. We just, all that type of stuff that you normally can plan out and budget and have already figured out and not have to stress about while on a trip. We couldn't do any of that.
Right.
Like, missing one major coaster is negligible in comparison.
Oh yeah. I mean, and again, you guys were, I mean, I traveled, I'm trying to think when the first time I jumped on a plane, you know, after the pandemic, it was around that time, but you know, I was domestic initially. I mean, first time I flew internationally after the pandemic was October of 2022. So it had been, you know, quite some time, but you guys were there, you know, more than a year before me traveling internationally. So you guys were the bleeding edge, and the fact that you're able to get out there and do all the things that you did.
There was like one person I knew who went, and I remember all of us, like when we like showed our first like post out, like we were getting credits in Paris. We were at a fair, and all of us had like, you know, people DMing us on Instagram like, "How are you in Europe right now?" Like, how's all this stuff? And because I tried to do a pretty good job of. I also didn't really want people to know we had that planned out. We kept it under us, but also part of it, we didn't want to get our hopes up too much that we were even going to be able to go.
Right.
I know, like Mark, for example, he was extremely hesitant that he was like, he didn't think it was going to open. I was like, we'll play it by ear. We'll keep going. And then it was like that huge sigh of relief. I think it was like maybe even 2 weeks before we were supposed to go. France had finally opened up, and that was the most integral country for us to open up, because if France wasn't open, how were we even going to get into Europe to begin with?
Right.
And then it was like, okay, France, Spain, and Denmark were open. It's like, well, I guess we can just readjust our trip and do France and Spain, and we'll just fly to Denmark. And then like the biggest sigh of relief, and this is maybe a week before we were going, maybe it was 2 weeks, I have the dates wrong, Germany opened. They're like, okay, we can figure this trip out.
Especially with Germany open.
But just Germany alone will fun.
Yeah. But what I was starting to say there is, again, given all the challenges unique with COVID and everything else, with countries still being closed, that, you know, the fact that you guys were able to get out there and make that trip happen, you know, it was a huge thing. You know, so what? You missed Wallaby, Belgium. Again, ironically, not because of COVID, but because of the flooding that happened there. That park got really badly flooded. You know, I saw some pictures of that. Some friends of mine over in Europe showed me, and that live near there, and I was like, wow. But you know, anyways, and we'll probably talk more about that trip, because that trip was legendary, and it influenced me in terms of what I did this past year, as you know. And I know, you know, for like Mark, for example, you know, he had never been to. I think Austin had, but Mark had never been.
Some Dutch parks.
And the German parks, but Mark had not been to, and I think Justin too, had not been to like Phantasialand and Europa Park, these legendary parks. And I remember seeing, you know, his posts on Facebook and talking to him offline, you know, how blown away was excited, and, you know, what they did, you know, and him and Austin doing Hotel Charles Lindbergh, which influenced me and all that. But I mean, just legendary. But I remember talking to them before the trip, and they were freaking out. Oh God, we can do this. So we're going to do this, you know, switching things around, plan Bs, plan Cs, you know, and that's what you had to do.
Document with, I think, 4 separate trip plans at all times.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Because for people who didn't know, we were supposed to do Sweden and Finland. Like, we were already supposed to have all been on Tega. And then, like, what was annoying is some of the parts, by the time we were already on the trip, those countries reopened, but we all had an agreement that we were going to have an itinerary we were going to follow before the trip started. So the only thing we had to readjust was Wallaby, Belgium, which for Mark and Austin, they just went to Phantasialand the second day. For Justin and I, we went on a credit hoarding adventure instead. it is what it is. Like,
Right.
no discredit to Fantasyland. It's one of the best parks in the world, but there were too
Absolutely.
many fairs, and I just didn't want to deal with it. And the other thing, Fantasyland during that time, every ride was over an hour wait. The park was
Well, it's
slammed
the
with
summertime.
COVID policies.
Yeah, summertime. It's a
It's
busy
not the
time.
same experience. I'd rather have gone to. I think that Jess and I went to like 9 small parks, including fairs that day, and I'd rather have done that.
Yeah, that's why when I went to Phantasialand and Europa Park for the first time, I didn't go in the summer because of what you guys experienced and kind of warnings about how busy travel is then, because the Europeans, they get like 6 weeks of vacation every year. So that's why I went after that season, and I did not have hour waits the first time I went there, which is great. The other thing you mentioned earlier, so another kind of funny thing of one of the things in the Enthusiverse, as I like to refer to it, is the connections, the kind of the 6 degrees of separation, Kevin Bacon game, whatever you want to call it, of where you're friends with someone else, and then they don't know each other too separately from you knowing both of them. So the people I'm referring to here is the Coles, Chuck, Chase, and how you guys are friends with them. And I met them separately from you, but we're all good friends. And Chuck, he's actually one of the few people that's been on this podcast more than once, because we're fairly new still, only here in the early part of the 3rd season. And Chuck's an awesome guy, good friend. I was a good friend of yours too. Great, passionate guy. And one of the first interviews that I did in season 1 was with Chuck. And one of the things he and I have talked about long before the interview and then during the interview is like what you said, and something that you believe in, he believes in, I believe in, is I'm a very passionate person with life. You aren't, he is, in terms of time. Time is the most valuable resource, because we only get 70 years, 80 years, maybe 90 years if we're lucky, maybe a little bit more if we're really lucky. And a lot of those years, the early years, school, you're a kid, you're too young. The later years, you're not physically fit. So you have even less than the 90 or 80 years or whatever. So whatever number of years, especially for something so physical like being a coaster enthusiast, you only get so much. And so you got to make the most of it. And I agree with you. And what I would say to you, Bradley, and I know Chuck and I are more like this, and you're different in this way somewhat, is the example you gave where Mark and Austin did a second day at Phantasialand, which in my opinion is the best park in the world. Not one of the best. You and I have talked about this now I've been there twice. And I would rather spend more days there and get maybe less credits on a given trip. And that's the kind of quality over quantity argument. And I know you're more of a quantity guy, which I respect, because at least
still go after all the major quality. Like, that's still like the first and foremost, because I think the biggest one where people are like, all you care about is credits, and I will always fall back on this. If I only cared about credits, why did I go to Australia before Japan? Why did I go to Australia before a lot of other places?
Right.
I got 15 credits. Like, the way the Australia trip even went, I didn't even go to Melbourne or Sydney for credits. I only got the Gold Coast credits.
Right.
I missed a few, which is just the nature of life. But I wanted DC Rivals so badly. My dad really wanted to visit Australia, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, you don't, as shocking as this may seem to some people, and we're going to talk more about later about how many credits you have for those that don't know and dig into that. But for as many credits as you have, good point. You don't credit whore, as the saying goes, as much as you could have, because you do go for that quality sometimes. But all I'm saying is I really push for the quality, where I'll repeat parks in a given in a given location in the world before I go to new parks, before I get new credits. I won't go to an FTC that's 5 miles away instead of going to, say, Phantasialand Europa Park again, something like that. And that's all I'm saying. And again, each of us, we have different levels. We have different,
And I guess another interesting part is this second day of Fantasyland would have been nice. Rewriting Tron and Fly, 2 of Coaster's my top 15. Fantasyland's my number 3 park right now. It would have been a guaranteed, but I have really fond memories of the weird experiences Justin and I had.
Right.
We went to a Popsico, and it was recently after the flooding, and I always remember how much was in the water. My dad's a big F1 fan, and I saw the stuff for Spa-Francorchamps. And like seeing fairs were just, there's all like when you go on weird, I guess, credit holding adventures, there's really unique memories that can be formed. And when I look back, while it's not the same, they're fond memories that I value. Maybe not as equal as obviously riding, an insanely incredible roller coaster, being at one of the best parks in the world. But all those weird memories, they're actually a fun day of just how many parks can I get to in a day, and all these just different experiences you have in just one day. That to me is actually infinitely better than going to like a good park. Like, let's just take like a good Six Flags, a good Cedar Fair park, or the like over in Europe. A good, maybe even great park. We're excluding the elite of the elite. Top 1%, top 2% parks. A credit holding adventure. There's so many just fun, random occurrences. There's stuff you can't make up that happens on those. And when you look back years later, going to the same, and I get your point of going to the elite of the elite parks. I always, every time I go to Germany, if I'm going at a time of year, I'm going to allocate a day for Europa, a day for Fantasia, for example.
Nice.
Like I'm always going to allocate the time for those two parks.
Right.
If I'm in Poland, I'm always going to go back to Energyland. There's exceptions. Like parks that I will always allocate time for.
Right.
Especially at foreign parks, because who knows the next time you're actually going to be there, even though I'm always hopeful of that. But a lot of the others, and this goes into why, at least for me, I feel I've gone to a lot more places than other people. I don't care about going back and going to an 8 out of 10 park unless there's like a new credit there. There's no point. Like good is just good to me. Like elite is what stands out. I'd rather gamble and see if I can have unique experiences riding crap than just go to a good park again, because I know what to expect. There's nothing that's going to change. It's like I now have 2 memories of doing the same thing. I'd rather keep creating new memories, and I'm not creating new memories doing the same things over again.
Well, I get what you're saying, and I can respect that. And, in terms of like you talk about the emphasis on the memories and how fun that credit hoarding day was with Justin on that trip in 2021. And, what I can relate to that in terms of what I cherish most in my life is not necessarily the material objects that I have. Yeah, I like cars, I like technology, and those are material kind of things. And I enjoy them. But what I like more than that is what I call at the real extreme, life-defining experiences, LDEs. These events that I have in life, these experiences, it could be a day, a week, could be whatever. It's generally involving travel. It's generally not here at home, sitting at home, and generally involving other people, but not necessarily, where I will remember those memories for the rest of my life until I say get Alzheimer's or whatnot, God forbid. Or, basically along with that, these are the stories that I tell. One of the things we do socially is we meet people, we have friends, we're waiting in line for a coaster, we're hanging out at home, we're having lunch or dinner. We tell stories. And the stories that I generally tell are my life-defining experiences, which are largely related to travel. And so what you talked about there, that's a life-defining experience. It may not be riding a Fly or Terran at Phantasialand. It's this shit coasters, but it's the adventures you had that day. And I totally get it. I totally get it. Well, Bradley, this has been a very interesting, as I knew this interview, and we're just getting started here, would be very interesting, just knowing your personality and how you and I click together. This has probably been one of the most interesting intros we've had for an interview.
It's kind of an intro. It's kind of sharing experiences.
Right.
Right.
But you mentioned one thing that I briefly touched upon that I found interesting that I did not know about you, which is the music. And I'm gonna talk more about the music later, because I think I kind of relate to a couple things that I want to talk about with you, but we'll save that for later. So I do want to go ahead and kind of jump into get the interview started. So let's do that. Okay. So the first half of the interview is our standard interview. Now, with some people, that's kind of all we do. Now, depending upon the person's background, if they work in the industry, or in your case, because of your tremendous experience traveling and going to parks, and your abilities to travel really smartly, like I said earlier. We're going to get into some details, and of course, all the credits you have. We're going to get into some more details there. That's where I'm also going to talk more about the music stuff with you a little bit. But the first half of the interview is our standard interview. It's what I call our theme park time machine, and we go back. Probably wasn't yesterday, especially in your case with all the credits you have. Probably was a ways back, and talk about some key moments in your life. And as part of that, we're going to talk about what I call your fear journey, which is how you faced fear with riding coasters. Because maybe, nowadays you probably don't think about fear, but it's, at some point in your life, it was something that was a focus. And we'll get to that later. But before you get to the fear journey, kind of not that you would need an icebreaker question, not clearly, but it's something we ask all of our guests. What is the first coaster that you rode?
And it's a fun story because for people who know me, they know I hate Gerstlauer. Like, I'm the most vocal. I hate Gerstlauer. I lost a lot of friends. Like, I was almost a community pariah for my opinion on where does Karen on.
Wait a second, Bradley. Are you telling me? Hang on. This may be a newsflash here. Are you telling me that you have controversial opinions?
Yeah, of course I do, but they're my opinions. Like, there's no one else in the community who has like my set of opinions. Right. I call, especially when I was younger, I called a lot of people in the community sheep. They just follow, right? Especially the big, the big personalities. I'm not going to name any names to get into that stuff. You can put two and two together. You're talking about the Steel Vengeance
fans, the people that say Steel Vengeance number one.
Fans. I've always gone. I've seen so many people, who are the Cedar Fair. They live at some point, and it's like the first four parks is Cedar Point, Kings Island, Kings Dominion, and Carowinds, and then it's like in either Fury or Steel Vengeance, always number one. Like, I never even the path of how I the parks I went to, especially living in Colorado. I followed my own distinct path. But nothing I've done, I don't think a single trip, other than some weekend trips, because obviously there's only so much variation you can do on weekend trips. I don't think I've ever done a trip that any other person in the community has done, unless they did the trip with me. Like, everything I've always done is all the time.
Right. You do unique trips. In fact, you could. Granted, you have a great job that you're very passionate about because you love sports, covering sporting events and all that. But you could potentially, of course, you probably wouldn't given you don't like to hang out with, necessarily a whole bunch of enthusiasts all the time. You're more of a rebel in that way. But you could almost start your own coaster focused or park focused touring. Like what the clubs do.
People would not like the trips I would plan though, because I'd be like, well, we're going to these two parks in the same day. If you know what you're doing, you'll get the park done in 4 hours. And hey, 4 hours, you got 2 hours of travel. We're going to go to another 4 hours. And that gives a leeway hour. That's what you got. You got 4 hours.
Stressful.
You can't figure it out in 4 hours. I'm sorry, but the tour bus is leaving because that's the way I travel. Friends go on trips with me, and I'm the one planning, and I am a control freak on planning. You're traveling at my pace, and I'm not slowing down for you. My dad and I was young is if you don't wake up in the morning, we will leave you in the hotel. Obviously, with a young kid, it was more of an empty threat, but. The truth is, it's only drawback. I don't drive. I have eyesight issues. If I was the one driving on trips, if you don't want to wake up in the morning, I will put a sticky note or text you being like, this is where we're going to be, this night. This is the hotel. See you there. You figure out how to get there. I'm leaving. The car's already packed up. I might be nice and pack your suitcase and throw it in the trunk. Sure. But no. But circle back and answer. So I live in Denver, Colorado, born and raised. My first credit was Fairly Odd Coaster at Mall of America when it was Camp Snoopy out in Minnesota.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, Bradley, again, first coasters are not milestones.
Yeah.
They're generally when we're very young. How old were you?
What would that be, 5.5?
Right. So generally, our first coasters are 3, 4, 5 years old. I mean, these are not going to be, our number one. So no worries. All right. Well, let's move on from that. So let's talk about your fear journey. Now, you've been on a lot of coasters. We'll talk about how many a little bit later on in the interview, but you've been on a lot, like you said, over 1,000.
Yep.
Now, of those 1,000 plus, which is the one that intimidated or scared you the most before you wrote it?
I guess I wrote Original X, and that was probably the most fearful I'd kind of been, because it's something so different. But
Right.
I wasn't a conventional person. I rode the adult coasters at parks first. Even when I was a tiny kid, my parents put toilet paper and insoles and hiking boots, all that stuff to make me have that extra height so I could actually get on coasters.
Right.
And this goes to show how backwards I get some of the stuff. I cried that my dad got to ride Tatsu my first Magic Mountain visit, and I was too short.
And how old were you?
I was October of 2006, so
Oh, wow.
what, 7 years old? Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But,
All right.
so I went to Magic Mountain multiple times when I was under 54 inches. I could have had the little, Magic Flyer credit that no one can get. I had the opportunity to get it, but I didn't want to ride kids coasters then. I just wanted to ride the biggest and baddest coaster there was imaginable. Even I was sad I couldn't ride. So to go into Fear Journey, I was actually, I guess, the wrong person. I never had fear. I will try anything once. I will do anything, even if I'm a little fearful, I guess, because people won't believe this. I actually have a fear of falling. So I don't like looking, if I'm at a skyscraper, I don't like looking down the floor. When I was recently at the Burj Khalifa, it freaked me out, especially when outside. I was always kind of walked a little slow. When I've done, I still remember it really well. My parents had me to do the Royal Gorge Bridge in Colorado. There's a wood bridge that's overlooking 1,000-foot jump. And I was so nervous walking across, and I still would have that same fear. I don't have it on roller coasters because I feel secure. But
okay,
I'm willing to do anything. I guess I'm good at fighting, and I guess whatever fear I might have, I'm really good at just pushing it aside and be like, I'm just gonna do something, even if I'm scared to do it. I'm just gonna do it, and by the time I do it, well, I did it. I'm happy. I enjoyed the experience. Or if I didn't like it, well, I won't do it again. But at least I tried it.
So, and I don't want you to necessarily go ahead and answer because I want to touch upon something else you said, but just think about this while I'm saying the other thing I'm going to say here. But keep in mind that when we talk about fear, it's not that you didn't do whatever it was. It's not that it's that you still went ahead and did it. You might have been afraid of it. You went ahead and did it, and then maybe you liked it or didn't like it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to, maybe, and I'm going to phrase the question a little bit differently, but maybe think again about what scared you the most. Not that you didn't do it. Again, you went ahead and did it, but it did scare you before getting on it. But before we have you answer that question again, and maybe it's the same answer, like you did ride the Original X. I've ridden both multiple times.
Yes.
And I rode the Original X, if you want to say, in pristine form. In fact, by the way, today is X's birthday. It is 21 years. So it was early 2002. I was not the first to ride it or anything. I wasn't doing a podcast or anything like that. And at a media day back then, but I was a season pass holder. I lived in Southern California back then in San Diego. And I was, I went for the season pass previews with a buddy of mine. And I think it was one of the first days that we went. And wild. And by the way, Bradley, if X is your answer, not to influence you or anything, in terms of this question, the very common answers, the common coasters that are mentioned for this are X, Top Full Dragster, and others, but those are probably the two most common ones, or King to Ka. But X, because it's so unique and so forceful, and the spinning aspect, it's intimidating. Just watching it, that drop. Going backwards up the lift hill. There's so many things. Now, in terms of answering this question, you can go beyond coasters. I defaulted to coasters with you because how many coasters you've been on. But it could be, given that you're afraid of falling and all that, it could be a drop ride. It could be a certain drop tower.
I guess then the answer,
yeah.
my home park was I guess still is for however long it's going to exist. Even though I don't really view it as my home park was Elitch Gardens. And I rode the drop tower there once, like the first time I ever went, and I lost my stomach. And I kind of had a fear of ever riding it because I just didn't want to go through that sensation. I did avoid it, but my dad kept riding it, and he told me, like, hey, if you just hold your breath, like get to the top and just hold your breath. Like just take a deep breath and just hold it, and then you drop and you exhale once you're at the bottom. You won't even notice that dropping sensation. So I guess it kind of goes, but then now, like, when I even do things, when I was recently in the UAE, I did this, like, I guess they call it like a flying squirrel position zip line, and it's over like the mountain pass out there.
Right.
And my fear of falling, I'm like, there's really nothing holding me in. I was, a bit scared, but at the same time, I'm one of those people that, like, I'd go skydiving, I do whatever. And maybe this is my fear, like, coping technique, is to just almost distract myself and just push through it, but at the same time, think of something positive, distract yourself. I've had, numerous times I've been riding Lex Luthor at Magic Mountain, and I'm riding with people who are completely scared, and I just start holding a conversation with them while they're talking. And then by the time the ride dropped, they didn't even notice that they were falling because we were just holding a conversation.
Right.
And I stopped talking. Right. And I guess that, like, I've helped people get over their fears literally while on a ride by doing that. And I guess that's the same. Not even thinking that that's the technique that's worked for me.
Right.
Then I guess I'm kind of answering a question. I'm kind of not. But
no, that's okay. You're bringing up an interesting point, which we really haven't talked much about on this podcast, which is not so much about, what the impact, which is what we'll talk about in a moment with you, of facing fear in a big way, but how to distract yourself from the fear, how to not let it, make you chicken out or, overcome you, succumb, make you succumb to it. And, your technique, it's not to say groundbreaking, but, we don't talk a lot about techniques like this. And the technique you mentioned, I've seen before. I've seen it for people afraid of needles, good nurses that are good at not just at getting into your veins with the needles, but just a bedside manner, if you will. If they know someone's scared or they can sense someone's scared, they'll be talking to them. And then, and they'll be doing it right as the needle goes in, they'll distract the person. So, on a drop tower, just having conversation, you're distracting. That makes a lot of sense. Now, just to confirm the one that scared you the most, would you say it was that drop tower at Elitch Gardens?
I was scared to rewrite it. I didn't have fear to get on it. I just didn't want that sensation again.
Okay, so was X the more one that you were scared of before you went on it?
I still wasn't even. I would go more of a hesitancy than a scared. Like, but maybe that's just who I am. That nothing. There's a hesitancy that, like, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do it? But I'm always willing to do something. So there's never been a time in my life, and you ever, because my mom wants to, like, ever ask my parents or interview or anything about them, they'll vouch. I've never had, I was scared to do something.
Right.
I've always been willing to, but if there was a coaster that's hesitancy, it would have been X. But then because X is so extreme, it's so unique, I had never been even remotely had a hesitancy. I mean, I guess there's been a scared of, hey, this ride is it going to meet my expectations?
Well, that's not a scared. That's not really scared. That's just
completely different.
Yeah, that's like a concern, if you will, or whatever. Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you a different question because I'm trying to drive something here. But so you and your mom came out to visit here in Orlando last February, end of February into the beginning of March. Remember that, right?
Yep.
Okay, first time ride on Gwazi, for example. As I recall, we also went and did the new drop tower. Well, the controversial, no longer going to be reopened, but then it was open for a few months, Orlando drop tower, right? Didn't we do that?
Yeah, we did that, and also the slingshot.
The slingshot, yeah. Forgive me, Bradley. I've done those two rides, even though they were only open for like
so many times.
3 months. I've done it so many times with different people. So, okay. Yes. So you weren't intimidated to go on that drop tower?
I mean, it's the thing that, like, I always, I guess, kind of that slight uneasy feeling when I'm actually at the top, but there was no hesitancy to just get on it. It's just like, if I'm gonna, it's almost the more I would think about it, yeah, sure, I guess that fear of falling could potentially kick in, but that's where the distracting myself comes in. It's like, if I'm gonna keep thinking about something, it's only gonna get worse. If I just do it's gonna be fun. Like, it's, if I don't enjoy the experience afterwards, well, at least I did it. Like,
Okay. All right. Let me ask you this then. So you were not afraid of riding the Orlando drop tower, which is, or was, one of the most intense drop towers from the forcefulness perspective, from the height, the tilt and so forth in the world. So let me ask you this. You weren't afraid of doing it. Is there an experience you had previously in your life that you can think of that was why you weren't afraid of the Orlando drop tower doing this first time?
It really comes down, because the only like type of ride I've ever been like, I don't want to ride again. Like, I did it once and was riding a traditional, like, because there's a difference between like the Intamin and like the SMS drop towers, for example. With SMS ones, I'm never like, I don't even hear people because it'll launch upwards and stuff in the way the drops are. You don't lose your stomach, but like those Larson drop towers, the Intamin drop towers, stuff like that, you actually lose your stomach. I didn't, but once my dad taught me a technique to ride it, which was just take a deep breath and you're fine. That got my like, okay, the only type of attraction I didn't want to deal with anymore, at least a common attraction, I have a strategy to do it. And now, instead of doing that, I just pulled a conversation and was like, well, okay, it is what it is. I'm waiting for the 3, 2, 1, let's drop. Let's just get this over with.
Okay, fair enough. So, you kind of did some ample description here. You've done a great job of describing how you distract yourself and you don't let fear overcome you. But basically, the bottom line is, throughout your entire life, even 5, 6, 7 years old, riding some of these bigger coasters, like riding X at 7. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a 7-year-old ride X or X2. But I also know, I also know that you're one of the most unique people I know. So if there's someone that would be in that way, I would not surprise me for you to be you. So bottom line is, you've never really been scared. And I've met one other person in my life that I can think of, maybe others, but one that I know of. She's a younger person. She's, now at this point, she's about 8, 9 years old. Good friends of mine, their daughter. And at 5 years old, they came out to Disney, which I know is not a thrill park. I know how you feel about Disney, Bradley, but won't get into that here necessarily. But, her at 5 years old, she wanted to go on Tower of Terror. She wanted to go on Rock and Roller Coaster. She couldn't go on Rock and Roller Coaster. She was too short, but she was fearless, even as a little kid. So that's the only other person I can think of, even back, that young, because, if you're younger than 5, you don't really know what's going on for the most part.
Yeah.
But, 5, 6, 7 years old, you can start to get tall enough where you can go on some of these bigger rides, bigger coasters, but you're also aware, you're self-aware.
To go back to what my first coaster was. And this shows what type of person I was. My first coaster was Fairly Odd Coaster, a Dirt Swallow spinner. So that's not like, one of those little tiny kids coasters that's at, or Barnstormer at Disney or something like that.
Right.
It's a decent sized coaster.
Right.
I marathon that. My first ever visit to a park, I was already marathon roller coaster. Like,
wow. How many times you ride it?
I've been an adrenaline junkie since the second my parents put me on something. I think I rode Fairly Odd Coaster like 40 times as a 5-year-old.
As a 5-year-old.
And I still remember they had this Axe flat ride that I couldn't ride that my dad rode. And I was bummed they couldn't ride. Like, literally from visit 1 to a park, I saw, oh, that looks like the most exciting ride. I want to ride that. Oh, I can't ride, and I'm sad.
So Bradley, what I was leading towards, I'm going to go bigger than what I was leading towards before. Okay. Would you say that you experience anxiety in life?
What? Can you repeat that?
Would you say that you experience, forget about coasters, in life in general? I know that you've had stress in your life. I can think of one thing in particular, which we won't get into details of, but I know that you've had stress in your life. Life is not perfect. Life does not go the way we want it to. What's that? Yeah. So that leads to challenges, stress, anxiety, etc. Would you say that you had challenges with anxiety in life? Does anxiety get to you?
Not really. I mean, with how analytical I guess my brain is, I always
Right.
overanalyze things.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess and it's why like I love travel so much. I do believe like life can change at any moment so quickly
Right.
that I want to live in the moment. Like it's almost I'd rather have tons of memories and have little money in the bank than have tons of money in the bank, not a lot of memories. Like I want to live my life in the moment. And I guess having anxiety, I guess anxiety is like, did I live my life to a full enough extent? But
Bradley, at 24 years old, you've done more in your life than the vast majority, than I would say 90% plus of the population do in their entire lives. So that question you already know the answer to.
So, but
oh, absolutely, yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting question because I'm struggling to actually think of like the correct answer. Because like I guess there's always like, you know, there's short-term anxiety, I guess, where like, oh, was I gonna do good enough on a test in school, or is this gonna work out? But it's stuff that like goes away really quickly. But overall anxiety, I guess not.
Okay, I didn't think so, but I wanted to ask you because we never talked about this before. So, because I was already figuring the answer there. Like I said, I didn't think so because of how you're talking about fear with me. Because fear and anxiety, they're not identical twins. They're fraternal twins, but they're very, they're similar. They're very similar things. So you are very unique, and I already knew that you're a unique person just from knowing you. But this is another unique side to you, Bradley, because most people, they have these moments they remember, say, rides and coasters and things like that, facing fear. They have, times in their life where anxiety has even consumed them, or it's been momentarily debilitating and temporarily debilitating and whatnot. So it doesn't surprise me that you're different in this way, just knowing how analytical you are. And that's amazing. I don't know if you realize how fortunate you are that you've not had to deal with fear, and even more importantly, not only had to deal with anxiety. That's tremendous. So I'm going to kind of move on from the fear journey, given your uniquities, but talk a little bit about kind of the end of that, which is, granted, you never faced fear on a coaster, on a ride, where you could feel like you could look at what it was like before, when you were afraid versus after, when you were no longer afraid, because you didn't have that delta, that difference. But obviously, you talk about your pillars, and coasters and theme parks are one of those pillars. So talk to us about, in this framing, in this way, how coasters and parks have had a significant positive impact on your life.
I guess they've had a significant positive, really, because all the like unique experiences I've had because of them. All the this kind of connects because this is part of the reason coasters got to where they were. So there's two, I guess, snippets I want to provide. One, early on, this was 2010. I was with my parents in Vegas, and my mom was gambling. My dad and I, there was a car museum at, I think it was
Imperial Palace.
Yeah.
I've been to that one.
And when we got to the gift shop at the end, they had one of those little bicycle license plates. You go, especially if you go to like a Walmart in this, I'll explain later. You go to the bicycle section at most Walmarts, you can find them.
Okay.
My dad bought me one with my name on it, and it became the idea, let's collect one from every single state, but you have to buy it in person.
Okay.
That's where the idea of visiting every U.S. state came from.
Got it.
A little bit later, when we did our first trip to Georgia, we drive everywhere. Unless we have to, my family doesn't like to fly, surprisingly. That's actually how we've made it to so many places.
Sure.
We've purposely, time and time again on road trips, we have purposely detoured to visit another state to say we went there. And that was even before, I even knew that there was a park there. Hindsight, I could have done so much travel, so much better. And that's something we'll touch on later.
Sure.
So there was the idea to do that. And then this is a little more personal, and this is when this correlates directly when the travel took off. For those who are like, oh, you're just a spoiled kid, your parents did, all this blah blah blah.
Yeah, no.
2000, my mom has MS.
Right.
And they kicked in really bad in 2014. I remember adults when I had eye surgery and just a lot of things were going bad then. I remember going upstairs to the kitchen, having to help my mom. She barely could walk around the kitchen. But one thing that got better, she also vouched I have no clue how many more years I have that I'm going to be in good health. We kicked in and started doing a lot of travel, and obviously roller coaster travel. Both my parents are enthusiasts. We did a lot of travel as a family, and it's kept. But ever since my mom, we started doing annual road trips, every year, my mom and I, because I guess the happiness it brought my mom and also being fit, my mom's MS has been back in remission ever since. She's able to run around parks with me. Obviously, really no one actually keeps up with me at parks besides, I guess, my dad, because he's just used to it. But as much as she can, she has. And it's really, I guess that has been the positive of the travel is, I think it's directly benefited the health of my mom. It's obviously, provided me happiness, my parents happiness. And for most people, if you're not having fun at parks and stuff, why are you doing it? Life is stressful.
Right.
It's, well, for a lot of people, that is, going to a park, seeing friends, riding a roller coaster is stress relief. But I can go a step further. It was almost the equivalent of therapeutic medicine for my mom, keeping her out of MS, all that stuff. It's all these positive memories. My parents have had the sentiment that, families that play together stay together.
Right.
So maybe that as a whole has been that's the positive I can think of with all this travel is it's the memories. It's kept my family together. It's kept my mom in a much better health. It's all those positives those are long-term positives that I think anyone can answer. Would you rather be going through, traditional physical therapy, or would you rather your physical therapy be the equivalent of walking around and riding roller coasters? I know I'd rather be riding roller coasters than being at, a medical facility going through actual, therapy. Therapy that is all just genuine fun, or actually going to physical therapy. It's a no-brainer what you'd rather be doing.
Right. Yeah, no, Bradley, that's very powerful and a good reminder. I've done some interviews, and we, Kim and David, even, we've done some interviews where we interview multiple people at once. And I originally thought about when I originally talked to you and your mom, because I always hang out with both of you guys together. Talked about interviewing both of you guys together. I don't like doing interviews like that because it's hard to talk to both people. I mean, sometimes it's just kind of has to be that way when we talk to park management or PR team. Sometimes it's two people together. And yeah, I get that. It's a little different. We don't get as personal with those people typically, but I kind of instinctively felt, I want to interview you guys separately. And that was honestly mainly because I know how analytical you are and the interesting conversation we've had. Look at the conversation we've already here in the interview. We're not even halfway done. And I knew, look at the stuff we're going to talk about at the end, more specifics about your skills and stuff. And experiences. So I instinctively kind of felt, okay, I got to keep you guys separate. But thanks for the reminder. I do need to interview your mom.
Yeah.
And I knew about her MS, but I did not know, because, I've talked to her quite a bit. She and I are very close and chatterbox and all that. I did not realize or make the connection that the going to parks, the exercise, or maybe the coasters themselves, because like you said, you're coming from a coaster enthusiast family, which is really awesome. That's not very common. Both your parents are coaster enthusiasts.
Yeah,
as well.
my mom worked at Knott's as Snoopy. In her late teens, high school, college. She was a dancer at Disney. She got up to upper management for old arcades and managing money. Obviously went to Magic Mountain. Both my parents are from LA. My dad went to Magic Mountain, Knott's, Disney. Every few weekends. My parents already knew about the major parks. It's a fun story you can save for later, but
well, no, I mean, don't tell the story, Bradley. Don't tell the story, because my point is and we already got enough to talk to you about. Yeah. My point is that you reminded me I need to talk to her, interview her. Here on the podcast, I talk to her all the time anyway. But so you don't have to. She can tell the story. You don't have to tell the story.
Yeah.
But the point is that I mean, I knew she's an enthusiast, but I didn't realize that her MS is abated by the parks. But and it's awesome. I'm not surprised in a way because of what I've learned being on this podcast. We have other people that, I mean, yeah, sure, the fear, anxiety, depression, the mental stuff. Yeah, that helps me. It helps so many people, parks and all that. But we have other people, David. We have McLean Waddell. I think you met briefly when we were at Carowinds, where it goes a little bit beyond that. Even some mental illness, but it's a physical thing. But I've heard of physical illnesses made better by the parks. I mean, there's the exercise aspect, the walking and all that, but there's other things too. So I definitely want to talk to your mom and get her story on that because it's powerful. But thanks for that reminder. But so I think it's awesome. You're an only child like me.
Yep.
So you're close with your parents, but you travel a lot with your mom, especially. So you're close with her. And I love it. It's very poignant that, when you talk about how parks or coasters have had a significant positive impact on you. Sure, it's the stories, it's the memories, but very personally and very poignantly, it's how you appreciate how it's helped your mom. And that's awesome. That's really cool. I love it. And again, we'll talk to her separately, but thank you. So that's great. So let's move on. So before we talk a little bit more about you specifically, kind of uniquities and so forth, we're going to have a few more questions. These are kind of fun questions, especially you, because you're really good at sharing your opinion on things. You're not afraid to share your opinion, which is like me, which I respect. So first one is, what would you say? Because you've ridden a lot of coasters. Heck, you marathoned, your very first coaster 40 times at 5 years old. So you've ridden a lot of rides many, many times. What would you say has been your craziest moment on a coaster?
That's really hard. I mean, because I guess when I think I'm craziest, it's also been the most memorable coasters, like experience have taken my breath away. Like
I'm referring to something. Hey, let me help you. I'm referring to not necessarily like this is the best moment, is Zen moment, or like something like that. I'm talking about like something weird. Like these are like evacs. These are like something weird happening.
If we go with that, and people won't believe me, I have 0 evacs. It's unbelievable. I've never been evac off a coaster. The closest I've had, maybe this is, and maybe either way, it's a good story.
Sure.
My first visit to Cedar Point, I got double rollbacks on top of the dragster. So maybe that's
the crazy moment.
That was crazy. And the closest I got is we were parked outside the station, ready to launch for a long time. The train in front of us rolled back. They pushed us back into the station. But I don't view it as an evac, because if you get the restraints can automatically release in station, even though that's not what's supposed to happen at all. That's not.
You didn't get off the ride.
Waiting and then all that time just for the next train to dispatch, roll back again. But now I'm on that train. I guess that's a crazy experience, but
that definitely qualifies. I mean, to the point of previous guests on the podcast, literally their craziest moment has been getting a rollback on top of dragster. So, I mean, granted that given the challenges that ride had with that Intamin's catapult system and everything, rollbacks, while they didn't happen every ride, every dispatch, they were somewhat common, but still they were craved. I never had one, but I have friends that have one, and literally, some friends of mine that have been on this podcast, that's what their craziest moment was. But so that's perfectly good answer.
I guess
it's a good answer.
When I think of that stuff, I'm thinking more of the craziest experiences I've had, but they've been, other than that, that's more the ride itself. The crazier experiences have been more travel experiences rather than an individual coaster experience.
Right. Yeah.
Again, with no evacs, none of that stuff. I've been very fortunate or unfortunate, I guess, now at this point, because it almost feels like an ongoing cruel joke. Am I ever going to get that evac? Which, at the same time, I'm fine with, but it's just, how has it not happened?
Well, I never got a rollback on dragster. Yeah, so
have been others. I mean, I guess the other crazy, and this recently was being in Mexico, riding a wacky worm that like valleyed, and the employees are just like climbing the supports to push the train, like because of course, whatever like safety policies that you see in the U.S. they don't matter in other parts of the world. I mean, I guess while they're crazy, it was like I've seen little like 9-year-old kids operating coasters at European fairs.
Huh.
But like I don't know, because I guess when I was thinking like the initial thought it's like something crazy that's happened on a roller coaster. But to me, like I guess that's crazy because of like our standards. But that's more like the experience of the ride itself, not while I was on the ride.
Bradley, I think you're doing what I know you do and what you know you do. You're overthinking it. Don't worry about it. This isn't a test. Your first answer, like I was already trying to indicate, let me drive it home, is a very, I mean, not that this is, this is all opinion anyway, but I can tell you from my experience interviewing people on this podcast, that is a perfectly valid answer. Okay. So, and I want to go back to that and just qualify one thing, or just clarify one thing, I should say. You said a double rollback. By that, what you mean is the train before you and your train before.
So I should have rephrased. Earlier that day, my first ever ride on Dragster, I got a rollback. I rode it again, not a rollback. I come back like at closing. The train in front of me rolls back. We had probably 30 people still left in line. About 10 or so of those people, like they're like, I've had enough. It's an hour already after closing on one of those haunt closings where the park already closes at like 1 a.m. They backed out. We're down to just one train of people. We just keep waiting for the park to get the ride up and running again.
Oh, I see.
They put us on. We roll back.
Okay, so you got 2 rollbacks in one day.
Yeah,
that's crazy. That's a crazy.
Oh, I put it on my bingo board when I guess now you're running on. You have to make a new, I guess for 2023 annual bingo board. I always put on the bingo board. First ever ride on Stratocoaster is a rollback. Like, my bingo boards are always impossible for a reason, and it's all stuff that genuinely happened. But
right. Okay. All right. No, that's a great story. I love it. The other things you mentioned are, I mean, they're unique experiences, not necessarily, I mean, anyone that would go to those fairs would probably see those things, or if you go to Mexico, you're probably going to see some crazy stuff like that. And again, still good answers, but I think your top little dragster answer is a great one, especially given you got the 2 in one day. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So let's move on. So I know the answer to this, although I know you have your star, your asterisk, your special for voyage and all that, but I know your quote unquote real regular answer, but to share with everyone else, what is your favorite coaster?
Favorite's Expedition G-Force.
EGF, right?
It's probably really at this point the only coaster that 100% it was told to me that coaster is closing at the end of 2023. I'm making a trip there. Almost any other coaster on Earth, I wouldn't care. I'd be like, there's another coaster on Earth that serves that purpose. I wouldn't care. When there's let's
Bradley,
use what?
Real quick, you said if it's closing at the end of 2023, right?
Yeah.
You're not saying, oh, okay.
So I said if.
Because I still have not ridden that damn thing.
No, I haven't heard anything that it's closing anytime soon.
Sorry, go ahead.
But using that hypothetical, I'd even go, let's use, we'll use El Toro, which is my number 3, to just give an idea.
Right.
With all the stuff that's been going on with El Toro, I wasn't getting like, you know what? If it closes, I got enough rides on it. I'll deal with it. Because there's like T-Express exists, Balder exists. Like there's other Woodies, there's other prefabs, there's other rides that kind of serve the same purpose.
Right.
I could deal with it. I'd be annoyed, but it is what it is. Expedition G-Force probably is at this point the only coaster in the world that like I would be heartbroken that it's gone. I would make a conceited effort to go ride it again.
Right.
It would hit me hard.
Yeah, I get it. I know you and I have talked at length offline, of course, about how much you love that coaster, and I need to experience it. I love Intamin, as you know, and it's now actually 2 Intamins have become my most frustrating and my 2 big white whales. El Toro, which is ironic because I'm from New Jersey, been a Great Adventure so many times, but it's always down when I'm there. Again, shocking, it's an Intamin. And then EGF, not because it's been down, but because of the hours of Holiday Park. And when I've been over there, it's just been such a challenge. But that's neither here nor there. But anyways, okay, so that's your favorite coaster. I knew that. Now, what I don't know is the answer to your next question. What is your least favorite coaster?
So I'm going to kind of give you two answers. They're different depending on how you want to go. Because most people view favorite and best kind of as like synonymous. Because Zodger is what I view as the best coaster, at least in the world currently, given how Expedition G-Force ran the last time I rode. So I thought the potential if you got into that, like, oh, but Zodger is what you list as your number one best, not number one favorite.
Right. Best and favorite can be two different things. Yeah.
So the quick answer, original Texas Giant is the worst coaster I've ever been on. It's the only coaster that I was in tears, like of physical pain. Like I would never ride it again. I rode it in 2006 and then rode it again in 2007, like a moron, I guess, and had the same experience, so much pain. Now, when we go least favorite, like actually least favorite, this is more like coasters I'd want to see close to see the community ride.
Okay, so this is your controversial.
It's controversial. Sort of, that answer more goes, the likes of a Carnon, a likes of a Beast, a likes of a Steel Vengeance. Coasters, I just genuinely, I wouldn't care if they closed tomorrow. I'd honestly throw a block party and invite whoever wants to come. Be like, hey, I want a party. It sounds cruel, but it's like there's certain coasters I know people would care enough about that I would fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool of Enthusiast tears. I'm like, I'll go take a swim through that.
Right.
And those are more my least favorite because of how much I have to hear about them and how much hate I've received over the years for not being the biggest fan of those rides.
Right.
So
your first answer, I rode New Texas Giant only once, and that was in 2007, and it was awful. It was absolutely awful. So I can relate to that. Your second answer I love, and this is something I love about you, Bradley, is you and I are very much the same. I as an individual, not necessarily, actually even representing this podcast, in terms of the stance that we took as a podcast, and me speaking out as part of that regarding the events of IAPA of 2022 and the poor behavior of a certain enthusiast, especially one in particular. And I've spoken out about that said enthusiast as an individual as well, and how much of a problem this person is in the community. I'm not one to shy away from, I don't want to say controversial opinions, but on just being honest and sharing my opinion. And speaking out against negativity, as the case may be in this case. So, I can relate to what you're saying about, you're not afraid to share your opinion and be unique. I don't care, how many followers I have on Instagram. I don't care. All I care about is I want to be genuine. What I put out to the world, when I say that Steel Vengeance is overrated as can be, you and I share a similar opinion there. I am being honest. I'm not doing it, like I know you are being. I'm not saying it to rile people up. Steel Vengeance, I'm sorry, it's a garbage coaster. It is. It's garbage.
I could have a long time ago maybe created a YouTube channel. I could have. I'll be honest. I think 90% of the photos I upload on my account are horrible. I don't think anyone should follow my Instagram or follow me on Facebook for quality content. You're going to get genuine, honest opinions.
Right.
I'm not here to gain your fandom. I'm not here to gain followers. I post what I want to post. You deal with it. If you don't like what I post, you don't need to read it. There's no point. But that's how I'm going to be. I'm not going to change the way I act, the way I think, the way I do anything for anyone. I'm going to be myself and do that. And if you have an issue with that, there's a figurative door somewhere. You can go through that door and go away.
No, absolutely. Yeah, you and I are very similar in this regard. What you see or what you read, as the case is be with social media, is what you get with you, and it's what you get with me. We're both genuine people. Now, actually, before we move on to kind of the second half or the last kind of third of the interview, which is kind of getting into some more personal things about you, and actually this one is going to be that way too. We're talking about favorites and least favorites and rating coasters and all that. And I happen to know that some of us, it's emotional. It's just what we think, I rank this above this. But I know for you, a lot of ranking for you is very analytical, much more analytical than pretty much anyone I know. Anyone. And I mean, maybe Austin comes close, but still, he's not.
It's a different analytical because I don't.
Still, yeah.
I don't.
He doesn't use Excel and all that.
Uniqueness and theming in like sure, theming matters, but it's not an integral. Like the coasters are fantastic without it. I'm not gonna, critique it down because of that. And if a ride is completely like copy and paste to something else, but it just does something better, and not a single element was unique about it, that's fine. It's execution that matters, not
right
for me.
Well, what I was saying about Austin is, I mean, yeah, he like me does look at theming and it matters a lot, but I mean, he is pretty analytical. He is more so than a lot of other people I know. And we're talking about Austin Brzanek, Amusement Insider, a good friend of both Bradley and I. But I think you are even more analytical than him in terms of not necessarily about how you rate things, but sort of how you rate things in terms of you're using a spreadsheet and you have your Goldilocks formula. So why don't you just briefly here, you don't have to go into like a tremendous amount of detail, just talk about your Goldilocks formula and what that is.
So it was an ongoing thing. I held conversations with my dad in Q lines really about it, and that's the reason I even came up with. I noticed even when I was back at 100 credits, all my favorite coasters had similar characteristics.
Right.
And I redo it like every year. I really should redo it again because Formula Rosa is going to throw a big kink in everything now.
Right.
But it's pretty much what, to sum it up, I take my top 20 coasters and, the average speed, the average length, the average height, the average of all that, and see what the average, and what's been interesting, the average has always been like mid 70s, 4,000-ish feet, like not too fast, not too slow, not too long, not too short, not too tall, whatever. And I guess always been interesting. Every single iteration of it, Expedition G-Force has been the closest coaster to the hypothetical perfect roller coaster.
Interesting. On the speed side, and this is my issue. And again, they're Intamins, the Intamin catapults. Yeah, I love Intamin, but it's not like I blindly love Intamin and every single one of their coasters dominates my top 50, 100, 200. No, I mean, there's certain Intamins I just don't like very much. Topple Dragster, King Ka, for most of the catapults, because my issue with them is they're so fast. Formula Rosa, they're so fast that they practically, at the speed they launch at, they can't do anything interesting for me because you can't, because of the limits of the human body, unless you want to kill every single person that gets on your coaster, which is not good for your business model.
The other, I haven't been thinking of it that way. It's also just the financial, because I don't have an issue, and it's why, like, for me, Formula Rosa was so much better than Dragster and Call. I don't really that the launch was that much better, but the fact, okay, you then threw a brake on and then you did something afterwards, you used that speed for something, not just for the sake of getting to that speed. But I don't even want to know actually how much Formula Rosa cost in comparison to Top Thrill Dragster and Caucus. It had to have cost a fair chunk more, even though they didn't build a giant tower, because they just put through so much track afterwards.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But there's so many coasters that, and it goes on both ends, because I'll use Steel Vengeance, for example, on this. It meets the height and speed like spot on, but it's too long. Midway, halfway through the ride, the pacing is thrown off. And for people who don't know with me, pacing and element flow matter significantly. It's almost, you can, not even to go with the cliche, you can have too much of a good thing, but if everything doesn't work together, there's an issue there. And I've noticed, because its most integral part, it variants with wood because of the way friction applies to them. Right. And in multi-launches launch coasters in general, the multi-launches in particular really throws off. But when you have a traditional lift hill, and I'm counting a cable lift, cable, chain, whatever traditional form of lift hill, the amount of feet of track you have per foot the ride goes up, there's a direct correlation there.
And
right, of course, because the potential energy, it had actually converted. Yeah.
And it's something, I think it's like 20 something feet of track per foot. It's low 20s. It might be like 22 or something. 20 is like the perfect amount. If you go well beyond that, unless you're a Woody, your pacing's off. And you go well below that, and the gigas, for example, falling, you're not doing enough with what you got. But there's a select few coasters that's fall right in that sweet spot, and it works perfect.
Right, but going back to your speed aspect of things again, I was talking about the catapults being way too fast. Yes, you can bleed the speed like Formula Rosa does, but I mean it's just like why bother launching that fast to begin with? Anyways, for me, my favorite coasters like yours, not because they're your favorites, it's just what I found to be my favorites. Again, are that sweet spot, speeds in the 70s, because I love positive forces. So, you can get really strong positives at those speeds and they're really strong, but also even negative air time can, feel a little more intense, at speed just because of how fast you're going. But, I mean, I can agree with you there. And then length matters, of course, like, 4,000 feet, that makes sense. For me, the issue, say, I have with Steel Vengeance is not that it's necessarily too long by default, on its own. It's that it's too repetitive. I like variety in a coaster, variety of elements.
Variety doesn't. I do appreciate it, but at the same time, Expedition G-Force doesn't, and El Toro don't really have that much variety. Because for me, sustained ejector, and when I mean sustained ejector, I mean truly sustained ejector. And I can name off the top of my, I can think off the top of my head. There's like 20 moments of it on Earth. If you're thinking there's more, there aren't. Like that's when I'm talking sustained, talking a B&M Hyper, airtime, hill, and length, but sustained ejector. There's not very much. Like there's 10 moments of it in the United States. Like it's that rare.
Wow. Okay. Well,
when you give me that type of element, you could give it to me 50 times in a row. That would be the best coaster in the world, period, for me. No questions asked.
Interesting. Well, I'll be curious to see what I think of. Hopefully I get on El Toro at least this year, 2023. Hopefully with the repairs they're doing. I don't know about EGF, yes, the schedule. I'm going to be going back to Europe, but we'll see. But I'm curious to see what I think of those two, because they're not just very high on your list. They're very high on many friends' list. I mean, So, all right, well, let's move on. So, like I said, I want to talk a little about music. So you mentioned EDM music, which, generally is instrumental music. But, I mean, do you Emascore, of course.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Are you a fan of that style of music, which is not only EDM, but
it does fit for coasters? It's never I would never listen to it in my free time, but I do appreciate it. I absolutely loved it when I was waiting in line for Helix, listening to the score track for that stuff like that. I appreciate it, but my favorite, I guess two favorite songs that are with coasters. I love the "Ride to Happiness." Was it Dimitri Vegas and Like Mike's song that they adjusted the drops a little bit to go with the song? It's a custom remix, and then the custom Bruce Wayne remix they use of Ecuador for Riddler's Revenge at Magic Mountain. I mean, I never hear any enthusiasts talk I love the Riddler's Revenge song. A, they don't play it as loud as they used to, but B, maybe it's because it's just not on a world-class coaster and it's been around for so long.
I do remember it though. Yeah.
But that's probably my favorite song that's connected to a coaster ever.
Okay, so what about I was talking about Emascore and pronounce it. I was what about, I mean, for me it's the 1-2 punch, and I'm going to come back to Right to Happiness, by the way, but the 1-2 punch of the Rookburg soundtrack for Phantasialand along with the Terran or Klugheim soundtrack. I mean, how about those for you?
I mean, I guess I haven't even really ever truly thought of them. It's just there, I guess, because every time I've been there, I'm always actually deeply in a conversation when I've been in those rides. I haven't been paying attention. But I guess music's always a greatly appreciated add-on that's so simple to do for most rides. I mean, even as tacky and lame as people can call it, I like that Darude Sandstorm plays that Scream at Magic Mountain. Just
right.
Literally just get something like. It's almost. I rather than just play music in a queue line than going with American Parks, the fun TV that Cedar Fair has, and whatever you want to call Six Flags. Can you just play music the entire time, even if it's pop top 40? Just it music never really can hurt a ride or the experience of waiting in line.
Oh yeah,
just use it. I understand, I guess, if you're dealing with copyright and stuff like that,
right?
There's fees, but
there's costs.
You're not just put the radio on. Like it works. It would help. Coasters with slow lift hills. Put on the speaker. Play some instrumental of something. Like
oh yeah.
Well, help the ride.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I love music on coasters. One of my main few criticisms of my number 2 Velocicoaster is that they did not go with onboard audio, with the incredible soundtrack, John Williams and so forth, Jurassic Park and even the Jurassic World, which is very similar to Jurassic Park. It's just there's so much potential there, and they didn't. But going back to what I brought up to you, whether it be the ambient music that's playing, which is basically I have the CDs for it. It's a full hour long, loop or whatever that they play various parts of Rookburg, again, the ambient while you're waiting in line or just in the land at Phantasialand. Same thing with Klugheim. Again, it's a full album. But also for me, even more importantly than that, I think, is what I think Phantasialand does better than, one of the things, many things it does better than any other park in the world. And they do it on Black Mamba, but especially on Terran and Fly, is their dispatch sequences, which in case of Black Mamba is both visual with the lighting as well as the music, the thunderous bump, 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 that African kind of sound. But, on Terran and Fly, it's that Emascore triumphant music in the case of Fly, and that sort of triumphant as well on Terran. Very powerful. I mean, it's not onboard audio. It's not playing through the entire ride, but it's playing, in that dark ride section, that mini dark ride section on Fly before you launch the first time. And again, it's playing before the first launch on Terran. I think is so powerful. I mean, you surely have taken notice of that, right?
Yeah. I mean, what we're holding is, I guess, the one that was actually really on flooding back is the Euromia music. That's like, while you were talking, that's like, and that's, I think, like a lot of people who've either been or have heard about, like, that adds so much to it. Right. Otherwise, I guess, kind of, not to discredit, it's still a good ride, but Euromir is like in my top 100 or top 150. It might honestly be because of the music at the core. Like, music can add so much. I mean, I guess music goes in with theming. It can go in as a component of theming, but it's simple things you can add to rides that can add so much to an experience.
Absolutely. And I know you have not ridden it yet. And, here we are. Actually, by the time this interview is released, quite a few more enthusiasts and other people in general will have experienced what only a few of us, I know only a few friends that have experienced it along with me, like Mark. We talked about earlier, Mark Martinez from El Toro, Ryan, again, good friend of both you and I, myself, and just a few others, which is Tron. Talk about music on a ride, making a coaster better, and theming in general, making a coaster better. I love Fly so much, but I have to give the edge to Tron. How well that coaster is themed visually and audibly is just amazing. Now, again, it's not even a top 10 coaster for me. It's top 25, but not top 10. But the theming on that, and again, the music, that Daft Punk soundtrack from Tron Legacy is so amazing how much it adds to that ride. So I can totally relate. But a ride that both you and I have been on that I did want to ask you about, and you already mentioned it because you love EDM, is that incredible soundtrack on Ride to Happiness. That EDM soundtrack that was made for it, or adapted for it, I should say, because that Ride to Happiness is Tomorrowland theme, which Tomorrowland's a big EDM festival in Belgium, and Ride to Happiness is located in Belgium, so it's perfect theming. That soundtrack is just so awesome and matches that ride so well.
Yeah, and it's I mean, I know there's expenses, but it can't be the hardest. There's so many EDM songs out there that almost for any duration of ride, there's got to be a song that matches, like, the significant moments of any roller coaster, and you can get a drop in the musical sense to correlate with this signature element. And Ride to Happiness, like it was fantastic that a ride did that. And I mean, Ride to Happiness like was perfect in the sense my love of EDM and love of roller coasters, they finally like truly met in one coaster, and it was absolutely perfect. Like that to me. I mean, I guess objectively, there's better music out there. And I understand why people don't want to score, but the best use of music on any roller coaster for me is Ride to Happiness. And it's not even close in the slightest.
Oh yeah. No, I totally get that. I respect that. I can relate to that. Ride to Happiness is my number 4. And a part of why it is my number 4 is that amazing onboard audio, that soundtrack. One thing, I don't know if you've listened to the interview, Bradley, but you met McLean when we were at Carowinds, right? I think you rode with him.
90% or something.
Yeah, I think you did met McLean, the Fury guy. If you haven't listened to the interview that we did with him in season 2, you should listen to it because riding Fury, and again, you're not necessarily a gigantic Fury fan, whatnot, but it's not your number 1. But I know you like it enough to enjoy it. Fury is therapy for him. And he discovered early on in discovering that it was therapy for him that adding music to it, and he uses headphones that are secure, so it's safe. It's not like a loose article kind of thing, and they're not like Bluetooth that are going to fall out like AirPods or something. And he safely wears headphones on the ride, and the ride ops are cool with it. And he has a special soundtrack that he has created and mastered basically to match the lift hill and the drop and everything. He syncs it all up, and it's wild because he says it really augments the therapy. Music therapy is a real thing, and music plus coasters, that's just additive. So anyways, just made me think of that. So all right, now we're going to get to the real meat of the interview here, and what some people that know you are probably really curious to hear some of these things. So you're 24 years old now. You just turned 24. Right?
Yep, 2 weeks ago, pretty much.
Yeah, back in December, right? Okay. And now I know that you don't have the most credits of anyone on the planet. You and I have talked about that.
No, we're close.
But I would guess, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct, that if you were to do the age credit ratio, like your number of credits versus your age, so how many on average you've got each year of your life, are you number 1 for that?
I mean, I guess really not, because if you go, the people are at like 3,500 credits, they're 40 years old. That's what 90 credits per year of age, and then 1,300 for 24 is what 60 or something.
So there are people in their 40s that have that many 3,000 plus credits.
Yeah, like was it Richard Bannister? I think he's I think early 40s, and he's mid 3,000s right now.
Wow. Oh, wow. Okay.
Richard Bannister, like the people who really push the limits. And the other that's crazy, if you go on Coaster Count, there's a German couple.
Yes, you mentioned them before. Yeah.
They might be in their 30s or 40s or whatever. They're not like I've looked at it numerous times. I think she's 9 years old now. She's at like 1,000 credits at 9 years old, and she doesn't even have like a B&M ridden yet. She's never been tall enough.
But you said there's a German couple. Is that their daughter?
Yeah, it's like a German couple. They both have like mid 2000s, but their child has like 900, and she has so many credits that not a single one of us is ever gonna get. She has these tiny kids credits like in China and stuff that none of us are ever gonna get now, because you weren't gonna get on unless you weighed like sub 80 pounds.
So Richard Bannister and this German couple and their daughter, these are people that, whether it be for business travel or maybe they have, perhaps money or, rich or whatever it may be, unique situations where they're able to travel like crazy.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's a big part of it. Okay. Yeah. So, all right. So you're not the number 1, even with the credits divided by age.
From what I've gathered, because you like Coaster Count, for example, you can filter by like age brackets.
Yeah.
I go. Maybe there's someone who isn't, and I know he's a friend of mine, roller coaster fan guy. He's probably going to catch me this year. Just Europe is so much better for getting credits than the U.S. Don't fool yourself. Right. Europe is infinitely better for getting credits. Like, I view it as even more miraculous that I've gotten this far with the U.S. I have over 800 U.S. credits. That is hard, incredibly hard.
Right, because of how spread out. Yeah.
800 in Europe is cakewalk if you wanted to do it in comparison. And then 800. I mean, you can get 800 in Asia by just staying in China. You don't have to leave.
Oh well, yeah. But you were saying something about this guy. You were starting to say something.
He's like a year younger than me. In my guess, the rate he's going, he's going to catch me this year.
Oh,
but besides that, I would venture probably, let's say top 3 in the world for my exact age would be my guess. Maybe number 1, maybe number 2. My guess would be top 3. Like I feel certain about that.
Right. All right. So I mean, to that point, I mean, again, maybe you're not Richard Bannister, you're not the German couple, but you're very much up there. I mean, from my estimation, you're probably have more credits even at 24 years old than probably 99% plus of Enthusiasts out there.
Yeah, I would more than likely go with that because you go on Coaster Count, and that's already, for the most part, let's even go. Only the top 5% of people who have a desire to count credits would even, let's say, put themselves on there. Right. And I think there's a few thousand people on there, and I believe I'm in the top 100 on the site currently. And then if you do the filter by age bracket, I think I'm in the age bracket of like 21 to 34, and like 3 people ahead, like a handful of people ahead of me, they're all in their upper 30s. Like you have to scroll down to find anyone in their 20s, and I think I'm the first person who pops up in the 20s.
Right. But even separating out your age, you're probably, again, 99 percentile or at least, 95 percentile, I guess.
Yeah.
Even, compared to people in their 60s and 70s. But I think, as far as my sphere, my friends and people I know, I think the next person I personally know behind you is actually someone that's the same age as you, 24. And that's Mark Martinez.
Yep.
Mark's 1,000 plus, which, I mean, and again, I think there's some similarities, between where a lot of his credits came from, and a lot of yours, given his family and your family. But we'll talk about that, with you. But in any case, you've got a lot of credits for someone that's less than a quarter century old. And I think that's awesome. I'm inspired by it. I'm not jealous of it. But let's talk about, where did that come from? I think there's multiple factors that kind of came into it.
There definitely are.
Yeah. So what kind of why you kind of quickly, kind of just without necessarily getting into a lot of detail, kind of lay out what those factors are, what those reasons are.
So one, I'm a numbers person. I always have been. It's even the way I play video games, most people they find that game they love. I achievement hunt. Like, I just love looking at numbers. I love stats. I love counting things. Sure. My parents, I had these notebooks as a young kid where it was like counted by 99s. And I don't even know how I would have known to do that, but it was like 99, the next would be 198, 297, keep going. And they were in the hundreds of thousands and millions. Like, it's just numbers that always, for some reason, clicked with me.
What, so in these notebooks, you were just for fun, you were counting up numbers?
I was just counting up numbers by, I picked at the beginning, I'm going to count by, 99, and 99, okay, 198, 297. It literally, the notebooks were in the hundreds of thousands. Like, I carried that notebook around.
Did you do all this in your head?
And no, I knew it in my head. I wasn't using a calculator. As a young kid. And I carried that notebook.
How high did you get?
I know I had notebooks that were above 1 million.
Wow.
Yeah. That was like my entertainment as a kid. It wasn't like, like my parents were going to the mall. I just had that notebook and a pencil. That was my distraction. Before, my parents didn't want me to have a smartphone when I was really young or stuff like that.
Right. Okay. So you're a numbers guy. That's one thing. What else?
2, and this goes with I wanted to visit every state. I think it was either TPR or CoasterNet early on one of the forums. someone mentioned this golden coaster idea. So very, very early on, birthday December 27th, which going with the American calendar system, you can't get much higher of a number. So I set very early on, oh, that seems like a fun idea to go. And then it's kind of answers, but kind of answers a little bit that, with liking numbers, having that, it was even like as soon as I counted up credits for the first time, I realized I wanted to go for credits to begin with. Like I didn't like kind of ease into it. I eased into how extreme I went for them, but from like day one, it's like I want to get credits.
Okay. And just to clarify, because I don't necessarily, and I know what you were getting at, but maybe some of our audience may not realize what you're talking about was your birthday. So your birthday is December 27th, right?
And yeah, so your golden coaster is your birth date in credit form. Okay. Now, of course, I went with, being an American, went with the American, so month, a year, so December 27th, 12/27. So that's been, since 2014, that was the goal. I wanted to ride 1,227 unique roller coasters. Now, at first, with the knowledge I had, I was at 1,227. I don't even know, like, how easy that was going to be.
Okay, the number is clear to me because I already knew your birthday, and I think, our audience was getting that. But maybe I'm just being obtuse here, but what do you mean by golden coaster? And what's
that? I found it on a coaster forum. Maybe that's just a term that was used and used. But the golden coaster, just like hitting like 1,000 coasters is significant. The golden coaster is, at least, it's the milestone that is your birth date.
Okay, yeah. For me, it would be 11/16, which is a good number, and yeah. I'm not quite halfway there, and I'm a lot older than you. I'm 49. However, my achievement of or getting credits has accelerated because I've learned things from you, from Gene. I had some personal things going on in my life for the past almost 20 years where I couldn't get many credits, which has changed, thankfully. So there's various factors where I'm getting more credits than I used to. So I think it was 165 credits last year in 2022. And my expectation, what's that?
That's a good year.
Thank you. From coming from you, that means a lot. And I plan to get probably around there, maybe even more this year. Even going back to some of my favorite parks and not getting many new credits. I like the combination of going back to favorites, those elite parks, not the 80% ones, the 95, 100%, top tier parks, but also go to new ones too. That's my formula that I like. But anyways, I think I can get to 11/16. But anyway, so the golden coaster. So you have the golden coaster goal. You have the kind of numbers thing, kind of factoring into that. Is there anything else?
I mean, I guess the other, in this is, I guess, also, is that most people would complain about it, but I think it was the biggest blessing in disguise that I lived in Denver. I didn't live next to other parks. I hate complacency. I love new experiences.
Right.
I think there's far too many people in this community that have become complacent, that repeat visit the same parks and could go to more parks. It's something we'll definitely go way more in depth later, but it's my number one tip of advice. If you want to go to new places, you more than likely you're going to have to cut back going to the same places over and over, unless, I guess we'll say lucky you, but I won't actually say lucky. But most people, you'll be fine. You live somewhere, you live right next to Cedar Point, or you live in Florida, you live in California, you live in that perfect part of the Benelux where there's just so much stuff that's so close that you're not wasting valuable resources to go to those parks. But even then, you technically are. Even if the park is in your backyard, it's still wasting time. Especially, but if you're just doing it solely after work, there's really nothing better you could be doing. Fine, but if you're actually wasting actual genuine time, then yeah.
Yeah, see, the travel aspect. So, and we're going to talk about some of your tips and tricks there. But for me, another reason why I got 165 last year is I can't entirely think this, but I partially do. So let me take a step back. So, this podcast, our mission is about positivity fundamentally, which a subset of that is facing fear, reducing anxiety, depression, stress, even physical ailments, fighting negativity. And that includes fighting negativity in the community, which is why we've taken such a huge stance in terms of what happened to Apple last year, which I mentioned earlier. So one of the things for me in my life, if this is something, it's a personal mission as well, for what I just described, is I learned this from someone in my life a number of years ago, is to look for the positive in any situation. Now, COVID, we were talking about COVID earlier and how it impacted you, you often, Justin and Mark being able to go to Europe. You had to delay it basically a year. And even then you were having challenges in 2021. But one of the great things that's come out of COVID, now it's not necessarily affected you, Bradley, personally, but it's affected me. It's affected a lot of people, is the increased tendency, the increased acceptance, I think is a better term, for work from home. Yeah. And now, granted, the types of jobs
never work
I
for
work
me.
in technicals. I know, I get not you, but there's more than you in the world, so there's other people.
Oh, I know.
I work in technical sales, which generally is a work from home job, but even then, there's now more, even in my profession, work from home is more common. And so what I discovered is, well, if I can work from home, I can work from anywhere. As long as I have an internet connection these days, it's back in the day, 10 years ago, 20 years, well, probably 20 years ago plus, you couldn't necessarily work from anywhere because the internet wasn't so reliable. Wi-Fi wasn't as prevalent. Phones weren't as prevalent. You would need a wired phone, conventional phone. Nowadays, with internet being so ubiquitous, cell phones, I don't have a home phone anyway. I use my cell phone at home. So if I, as long as I have internet connection, cafe, it works for my car, I'm good to go. I have my phone. I'm able to use my phone, able to use the internet, able to use email, web, etc. I can do my job. So that's how I was able to do my road trip back in August. I didn't take a single vacation day, and I got my job done ethically and properly because I worked during my core hours, and it was in the early morning and evening that I either drove or visited a park. A lot of days I just went to the park in the early morning or evenings. And then weekends, of course, I went and did full park days. So that is one of my secrets, so to speak, where I'm going to keep doing that. And this year I already have big plans in mind with that in mind. But there's different techniques. But and again, that's where that time resource, where I'm really pushing that, and I'm really proud of that. I came up with that on my own. The idea of doing what I call my workations, where I travel, work, and then go to parks at the same time, in the same time period.
It was a little different, but that's what I tried to do in December. Obviously, I was particular what I wanted to accomplish, and weather nipped me. I mean, we go with the credit thing. A goal of mine, and I know a lot of people have this same. It's 100 credits a year is actually what I've said as a benchmark. Where this sounds horrible, but it's kind of just I've gotten used to. A year I don't get 100 credits, I view as, I guess, a disappointment. It sounds bad, but I know. I got 98 credits this year. I had 3 credits planned in Texas. I was going to go for 2 of the 3. All 3 of them ended up being closed because it was that deep cold that went through the U.S. at the end of December. Right. And all those credits, the only time I had out, I could have gotten them, given it was around Christmas, so the parks weren't open certain days. I missed them, but I get the idea. That's my plan in the future from here on out. Really, is I'm gonna go work an event, whether it be an individual game or a tournament or multi-day, whatever. Be like, well, on the off days or on the way to and from, or if I'm connecting multiple events, I'm gonna find whatever coasters are on the way. If I have to detour, sure, that's the nature for where I'm at. I have to detour to get stuff, but mix work and play.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I do. That's what I was just talking about. And you've done some similar things, but I realized you didn't hit your 100 in 2022, but 98 is still pretty darn good. I mean, again, we talked about percentiles earlier. I would bet that you got more credits last year than the vast majority of Enthusiasts. Still 98 new credits is still nothing to shake a stick at. So yeah. So I think there's one more thing that maybe you're not mentioning it now because you mentioned it earlier, but your parents being enthusiasts, they got you into this when you were really young. But even, once you got into it, they were, wanted to travel and they wanted to go to parks all over the place too, right? So that was part of it too, right?
Yeah.
So how old were you when you first went to Europa Park, Fantasyland?
19.
Okay, yeah, because I knew you went there before you went there with Mark, Justin, and Austin. So 19, so that was about 2018 or
2018.
So before Fly, but that's the first time ride Terran, a couple of years after Terran opened. Okay. All right, yeah, no, that makes sense. And that was your first time riding EGF as well?
Yep, first time in Europe.
Okay, got it. Okay, so this is a combination of things, the numbers, you've got this, the kind of goal orientation, your golden coaster, your parents for enthusiasts, traveling and so forth. Now, speaking of traveling, let's talk about, I know you're good with flights too. We can talk about flights, certainly, but I know you're really good with road trips. But just in general, we can talk about road trips, flying places, etc. Let's talk about how you're able to do this, because I think one of the things we should clear the air on, you mentioned this earlier, is, a lot of people that are jealous of you, and jealousy is it's never a good look on anyone. And there's a lot of misunderstanding. A lot of people think, oh, well, he must have like rich parents, or, oh, isn't he lucky? I know people think like that about you, but no, I mean, it's not like your parents are super rich or anything. You're hard workers, etc. But like you guys, it's not about having lots of money, right? It's about being efficient with what you have, right?
Exactly. And
so let's talk about that. Yeah.
I have a series of Instagram posts that I do think do a pretty good job of explaining some of the stuff, whether people read them or not. Because maybe, I know a lot of people on social media, they just look at the pictures, and I don't post good pictures. I know that. I don't care. Everything, when I write up like and actually post, because now I'm at like 10 posts a year. I stopped. I don't care as much.
Right.
Well, normally when I post something, there's normally significant content I write. But I'll start with the first thing. I saw this, as controversial as a figure as he may be, Rob Alvey. This was a deep in the archive of GPR. This was before their channel really took off and had million subscribers and stuff. How they did stuff, and it clicked with me. My family did. When I go to, we very rarely eat out. I don't go to the movies. I don't drink any alcohol. I don't do any, anything like that. Even when I do go to a restaurant, I never buy a soda really, unless it's something really special.
Right.
I guess we can go to the traditional stereotype. Jewish mom uses coupons. There's no shame in that. It's being smart.
No, of course.
There's a bunch of small things that I'm confident there are so many people who will be listening to this, or coast enthusiasts, that you could easily chop out $50 a week from not going out to eat, as often, or getting drinks, alcohol, whatever it may be. You just think of things you spend money on that you don't need to spend money on. Think of it, $50 a week. Times, we'll just use simpler. 50 weeks, that's $2,500.
Right.
I go with the average, and average even international trip, if you're smart with airfare, it's $1,000 a week. Okay, guess what? Just because you cut out, I don't buy a soda when I go out to eat, or now one less time a week, I don't buy a meal out, I eat at home. I have an entire trip to Europe I just budgeted. It was that simple. And I've been doing that my entire life. And, go a step further, living in Colorado, I don't have any appealing coasters. I've been to Elitch's once in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
I've been to Elitch. I've been to Lakeside twice. I didn't go to the Lakeside for the first time until 2016, I think. It just never had an appeal. I actually only went to once, started counting credits, and my dad had told me the Woody was good, but that was it. He told me the park was horrible, which it is.
Right.
The other, and I know not everyone can replicate. It was a big thing. The way my dad's work has always been, he was allowed 2 weeks off, Monday to, 2 work weeks off in a row. So Monday to Friday. You connect the weekend before, the weekend in the middle, and the weekend after. That's 16 days.
Right.
It was always, what could I get done in 16 days? But a lot of times, it's changed a little bit. And my dad at certain times was fortunate. I'll use a really good example. And I know a lot of people can't do this. And this shows, I guess, how weird I am as an enthusiast. My most productive year was 2018. I did my Europe trip, but the budget for that, I did not ride a single coaster other than a random, just short weekend trip down to New Mexico, like a 6-hour drive. From the first week of August 2017 until the second week of May 2018. That is like 10 consecutive months of zero coasters.
Okay.
But it was to do one big trip. I've used this I like using food analogies a lot. I'd rather have one big cake than have cookies all the time. As the thing I've used. That one big trip. Because also, this is, I guess, a basic algebra equation. I relate the cost of a trip to like y equals, 100x plus 500. Well,
okay.
And the 500 is like a base cost. Let's use, a trip out of the country or something. That the 500 is your airfare.
Airfare,
right. The 100x is your daily cost. It's going to cost you $100 a day on average. The per day rental car cost, hotels split across people, park tickets.
Right.
If you only do a 2-day trip, that was $700. It was $350 a day. Now, if you did a 20-day trip, I know not everyone can do that. Your trip was $2,500. Your average day was $125. You see how a longer trip is cheaper?
Right.
I'd rather consolidate. Let's say you have 2 weeks off. I'd rather consolidate all 2 weeks together to do one really good trip than 4 okay trips. I know not everyone can do that, so it's not the best advice. But from like a mathematical standpoint, it's smarter to bulk stuff up, and that's how we did stuff. The years so my first visit to Cedar Point when I really started kicked in as an enthusiast was 2014. I was sub 100 credits. We're now here in 2023, 1,300. So, 1,200, and COVID was a slow year for me. It just wasn't going to be. And it was late 2014. We'll really use 2015 to 2022, really, because it's just a tough. That's 1,200 credits in 7 years. That's 150 average or whatever.
Right, right.
The way I did that was, I was given a 2-week window. What can I get done in 2 weeks? I didn't really. I try to limit repeat visits.
Right.
I know a lot of people, they had 2 weeks. They might be, 3 days at Cedar Point, 2 days at Kings Island, blah, blah, blah. And they'll, in that 16 days, they might only go to 5-6 different parks. A 2-week trip to me, the way, and I know there's different budgeting on this, but, at times I was using Cedar Fair and Six Flags passes to a full extent. 16 days could have meant 25 different parks visited.
Right.
That's how you
get when you say parks, some of that's like FECs or very small parks.
Trips back then, that was 25. Like the smallest park I think on any of those trips was like a Walden. It was. I wasn't going for.
Was it Waldemere? You said.
What? Yeah, that was like the smallest park back then.
Like a 5 park. Yeah.
Now, I mean, I've had times where I've done 20 parks in a weekend, but that's counting family entertainment centers as a park. That's counting an individual alpine as a park. But back then, that was like 25, like what people actually think of as parks.
So now to be fair, so part of how you've been able to get so many credits, even with you being so young, is in certain ways you're going for quantity over quality. Your power credit whoring, as the expression is, where you're hitting multiple parks in a day. Where, like, let's say on these trips, you in the process of getting these new credits, you discover a new coaster that you really like, maybe even one that's, top 10, top 25, but you're not necessarily repeating it. In some cases you are, but like because of your schedule, you're not maybe riding it that trip at least as much as you'd like to, right?
We'll use Fury. We've already talked about.
Right.
I rode Fury in 2015. I didn't ride it again until 2019, and then again until late 2022. I was in North Carolina a few other times throughout those times, but it didn't make sense. I didn't have a Cedar Fair pass. I wasn't going to spend the money again because it's like, even if you buy a discount, like $40, $50, not including parking, all any of that.
Right.
There's other things I could have done with that money, and that's what I decided to do.
Right. Versus, the first time I met you and your mom in person was in, what was it, about April? No, I'm sorry, in the summer. So like, I think it was July of 2021 when it was kind of the beginning of the road trip that led you up to meet up with Mark, Austin, and Justin to go to Europe that summer. And of course, Mark and Austin are here in Florida, so it made sense to come out here to Florida. They live like a mile away from where I live now. But, so you and I and your mom, we three of us met up at Universal Islands of Adventure. And that was your first experience riding Velocicoaster. Now, granted, you had been there before. You had already been on Hagrid's, right?
A few months earlier, yes.
Right. Okay, that was before I met you guys, right? So, but you had not been on Velocicoaster. So that was kind of a repeat park visit so that you didn't have to get all the credits at Universal that day. So I remember we rode Velocicoaster 8 times and you wanted to analyze it because you knew it would be a high-ranking coaster for you, who rode it in different seats. And again, you're very analytical. So that was kind of a unique situation where you had been to that park before. So yeah, in fact, Stricker's Grove doesn't count, only has a couple coasters. So I've not really been on a trip with you where it's hitting a whole bunch of new parks, and doing that efficiency run, right? But so
it's, and another, I guess, to go with this, and this is definitely noticed in Europe. Let's say there's a park, just any random park, and the consensus is it's like a 3/4 of a day park.
Right.
0.75, we'll just use for the math sense. The average person, 0.75, they'll round up to 1, they'll spend all day there. Me, I'll find another park that's similar to that, and I'll round both of them down to a half a day and do both in the same day. And that's always been the thing. That's how my first trip to Europe, it was 18 days. I didn't even go after like +1s. I think the only true credit hoarding I did is I went to Mega Spiel Static because Disco Twister did one of the ultimate meme credits for those who don't know. It's actually, I think it's the world's best like traditional actual kiddie coaster. They put a kiddie coaster in the dungeon of like a family fun center with blaring EDM. It spins and there's like random like disco lights and like a skeleton on the floor. It's fantastic. But I knew about that. I'm like, I had to get this credit. But besides that, my first trip to Europe didn't include like going after all like the butterflies and +1s, any of that. It's 175 credits in 18 days.
That's wow.
Without actual credit holding.
And that was in 2018. That was your first trip to Europe. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
People told me I couldn't even do that. And now in hindsight, I'm like, I wish I didn't listen to you guys because I knew I was going to be able to do that. I would have put more in, but people said I couldn't do it.
Well, that right there is kind of a good kind of icing on the cake of this question before we move on, of a good kind of learning lesson in life in general is, there's going to be doubters in life, whether it comes from jealousy or just negativity, whatever. People say, oh, you can't do that. That's impossible. That's not a good idea, whatever. Now, sometimes it's good advice, but I'm not saying to you this, to you, Bradley, I'm just saying this to people in general, people listening. Don't take that negative, those can't, those don'ts, as gospel. Sometimes, a lot of times it's noise, or like I said, jealousy, or just, ignorance or whatnot. So, I mean, and Bradley, like you said, if you would listen to those people, or, you would have been able to do more. But just, and again, it's okay. You listen to them. Look at what you did. Look at what you did.
I was listening to the advice of people saying, hey, this park will take this amount of time, and I wanted to be careful on certain things, and
right.
So it wasn't like people were like, "Oh, that's impossible." It was more. I eventually, when I even went over that trip, and one of a few of the good credit hoarding friends over in Europe who know those parks well, they're like, "You know what? You were right. You could do that, but it's almost like a gamble that just worked out for you. You were kind of pushing the limits." But I've now further, because it's a big thing, and I have I guess, regrets, because some of the first trips I planned, in hindsight, I think now were horrible trips.
Well,
all the knowledge I've learned, have done so many things. And that's why, like, I have, venture people to check them out. They're crazy. I have put a series, I saved them on my, as highlights on my story, of how if I were brand new, how I could go from 0 to 1,000 credits in 5 years with the restrictions of I would get like, I think I was playing the restrictions of I was getting 2 weeks off a year paid, like 10 work days, plus, holiday weekend and stuff. How I'd go from 0 to 1,000, how much of a change. But, oh God, I feel like I've lost. But everything with this, it's obviously a learning experience. It's not like I just came, and the first trip I ever did was perfect or anything. It's taken years to get to this point of like knowing, every person's different, like what I can do in one day, what can be done with X amount of time, the tips and tricks, obviously finding good airfare, finding a good car rental, all that stuff. It takes a lot of time.
Right. Well, and realize you look back and you could have done it better, but woulda, coulda, shoulda. You learn for the future.
Exactly.
I mean, 175 credits in the better part of, basically 2 weeks. I mean, it is amazing, and that's probably a world record. Or if not, it's close. But don't beat yourself up over it. And my comment earlier about people, the naysayers. I'm not saying to always ignore the naysayers, but don't necessarily take what they say as gospel.
Some of the time, they're actually looking out for your best interest, or they're giving you advice that.
Right, but you got to weigh their advice.
They were thinking about your best interest. Absolutely,
you got to weigh their advice. Their approach versus yours. If it's different, maybe they need to sleep more than you do, or maybe there's they don't drive quite as fast as you do. Maybe they eat more often. I mean, there's all different factors that can factor in, but just always weigh all the different things. But and I think this is a good time to mention, and you'll be able to mention this at the end too. But I think it's becoming apparent to me that for those that aren't following you, or at least check out your Instagram page, that there's some good tips on there. Like you said, like your story has the 0 to 1,000 credits in 5 years. So your name is listed in the title of this podcast, Bradley Edholm. But your Instagram is just your first initial last name with an underscore at the end of it. So B Edholm. So if those of you that are looking for you, and then at the end, we'll talk about more about how people can find you, Bradley, but your Instagram page is a good resource. But let's talk about one more question, kind of regular question. Then we're going to wrap things up with a couple of questions we always ask at the end. And this is the question I've most been looking forward to, Bradley, as you know. So there are controversies. Any large community, and the Coaster Enthusiast community is somewhat large. I don't know, thousands of people around the world, probably several thousand overall, maybe a few more than that. But any large community has its controversies, and there's all sorts of controversies. And we're going to talk about one of them today. And that controversy is related to what we call, or what's affectionately called by many of us, Bradley credits. Now, Bradley, I
hate the story of how that came, because the person whose account stemmed from, I won't go into that. Just it brings back negative memories of that. So there's that component, but
let me finish. Yeah. So first of all, Bradley, you and I have talked about this offline. I know that person. I have experience with that person too, as you and I talked about, not so great stuff. But I didn't know that person created the Bradley credit thing. I just knew of it through people that are actually mutual friends of both you and I, like Bennett, Coaster Dolphin, and things like that, or Adam Torres. And I knew it. I only know of it as kind of a fun joke, not taking your life too seriously kind of thing. So I look at it as like a kind of affectionate, fun thing. And whenever I refer to it, or I'll do my polls, and it's a joke thing, it's not in any reference to that other person that we're not going to talk about, he who shall not be named. So I want to clear the air with you on that here on the air, first of all. But there's all kinds of jokes, and obviously you have you mentioned this earlier, over 1,300 credits now, right?
Yes.
And, we've talked about your trips, and, 175 in about 2 weeks back in 2018. And some people might be, skeptical about, are the rules being bent, or whatnot, or what you count and what maybe other people don't count as new credits. So this is your chance here, on the air of this relatively small, fairly new podcast, but nonetheless, this will be out there as a reference. let's dig into what you count as credits. What are literally Bradley credits? What you are counting and not counting.
I guess this is what, if anyone ever questions, I have everything up to date on Coaster Count. There's a very select few weird fair credits. I think ones I found in Mexico and stuff that aren't on Coaster Count. So there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. But then I have an up-to-date, I've been lazy this year because with work and stuff, my love of coasters has actually faded a bit and I haven't cared as much. But up until the start, I think it was right when I hit 1227, I have an up-to-date Word document that has all of my credits listed the exact same way Coaster Count would be, with the ones that aren't on Coaster Count highlighted in red. And I've had numerous times, I'm like, oh, did I do my math wrong? And it takes a while with all the puzzle ones. I've recounted every credit almost once a year to make sure everything still adds up, and it always has.
Right.
But I'll use this, I guess, as a platform to say, any of these people, I'm going to go maybe a benchmark of 600 plus. If you have 600 plus credits and you actually want me to take you seriously, go put yourself on Coaster Count or Log Rider, one of the things. Don't just say you have 600 credits.
Right.
Or put it in your bio on Instagram. Put the link to the Word, Word or Google Doc. Because honestly, if you take it serious, you count to a high amount, make it public knowledge how you have that. I had for a while, and you can still look up Bradley Edholm on Coaster Count. I had the link to my Coaster Count numbers on my Instagram. You're gonna take the stuff seriously. Let it be public knowledge. If your count's high, you have nothing to hide. Make it be. I have nothing to hide. I have no baggage. Yeah, but to go to what I count, obviously, any traditional roller coaster that anyone would count, I will count. When it comes to dueling coasters, Mobius loops, all that stuff, if a side can run independently, the key word is independently from another side. If I, let's take Racer at Kings Island. If I ripped the left side off, would the right side still operate? The answer is yes. If I launched one side of Superman Escape from Krypton, the other side was just torn away, it would still work. And this is the one we disagree with. You use Racer at Kennywood, the Mobius loop. You take out one side of it, the train gets back to the station, it would derail because the other station's no longer there. I don't count Mobius loops as 2 credits, even though Coaster Count would. I know a lot of people. I count them as halves. Fun story. I thought about it, but I don't have an opportunity to do it anymore. I was going to do, and I actually was going to do this for 600 because I was so mad that the Blackpool closed, the wooden one, and Icon wasn't going to be open. I was going to do what I call a milestone skip. I was going to have 599 credits, ride one side of Grand National, 599 and a half credits, go ride something else. I never had a 600. I went straight to 600.
Oh, 6.
A Mobius loop means half a credit every time. First time I rode Racer at Kennywood, the first time I rode Grand National, I got back in line and rode the second half because it's not a credit. If it's half a credit, it doesn't operate by itself. I will argue tooth and nail with anyone about that. That's not a credit.
Okay, so Bradley,
2 credits.
Okay, but so before we continue, because I don't want to, I want to kind of address as you're talking here, and I don't want to get into too many points to come back to. So sorry to interrupt, but so first of all, when you say coaster count, you're talking about coaster dash count, right?
Yes. That to me is the be all end all. People are like, if it's on RCDB, it's no, RCDB doesn't count fares and a lot of other things. Coaster count,
right? They
have RCDB as a backup for their data. That is if you take counting seriously, that's what you should be using. That's
right.
I think it's the number one before anything else with planning trips. You spend obviously you want to spend more, go ahead. For a higher tier membership, there's no actual difference. You buy the $3 a year, it's 25 cent a month membership for Coaster Count Plus or whatever they call it.
Right.
If you're $3 too much, don't go buy a drink next time you go out to eat. It's $3. That's nothing.
Yeah.
That's the first. Every single trip I plan from here on out, I log on to Coaster Count. If I'm looking into going, let's say to Germany, I pull up a map of Germany on there to see where all the credits are. That is the first and foremost tip I will give anyone when planning trips. Because you might not know a park exists in a certain area. Your geography, you might think Kennywood is close to Knoebels, for example.
Right.
No, this map will show you everything and be like, no, it's on the western side, Knoebels is on the eastern side.
So thank you for clarifying. So it's Coaster-Account, the website, which is not run by a European company. I think it's like Netherlands or Germany.
Yeah.
I use it as well. I've used it for the past 6 years. Since 2017, I converted from spreadsheet over to Coaster-Account. I kind of made a big jump. I'm a huge fan of it too. I do the $3. Who cares? $3 in this inflation mess that we live in now is half of a Starbucks. It's not even talk about half a credits. That's a half a Starbucks. It's not even a full drink. So who cares? I mean, for the whole year, it's well worth it. It's the best $3 ever spent as far as an enthusiast. It's a great website. It's a great app. On the iPhone, I have it on my iPad. It all syncs. I love it. I love it. It's great for finding new credits, like you said too, Bradley. And I go by it religiously. I know, Bradley, you, and again, we're friends, so it's fine. But, the DMs from you that I got with Racer, because I do a post in a story about each credit I get. And yes, because it's counted as 2 in Coaster-Account, I count it as 2. I know you disagree. And again, we can agree to disagree on things like this. But I think we can cut to the chase here about people's skepticism about your how you get your credits, because if you're using Coaster-Account, like you said, I have my link in my Instagram bio at the end to my Facebook. You click on it, you can see where my credits are, and it's I'm very transparent about it. So, but you said and this is why people ask me if I use LogRide. I love LogRide. It's awesome how it creates a trip report for you at the end of the day. It looks really cool. I used it for a little while last year, and I would post the trip reports. It's fun. I love sharing stuff like that. But I'm sorry, I stopped using it because I was trying it out. It doesn't have credit it should have. It doesn't have defunct credits that I've ridden. So I can't count all my credits in it. And that's a huge problem for me. I'm not going to use 2 apps.
I one time was going to look into putting all my stuff in, and I was still going to use Coaster-Account because even though I use Coaster-Account, I keep a backup Word document just in case Coaster-Account were to the people who run the site were to stop running the site.
Right.
I like to have a backup. A hard
right. No, I get it. But
I looked into it and I'm like, I can't the fares, and to me that's a bit there's so many fare credits. And I went with this, one was like, oh, if it's on RCB, it's on credits. So why does Olympia looping come under that? How are you not going to count that if you were to go ride that? That's one of the, that's the most famous traveling coaster in the world. Yes, every once in a while it is at a permanent part. And I guess at that point, that's why it's made it on the RCB. But if Olympia looping never made it to a fair, technically Olympia on RCBB, you're not going to count that as a credit. And that's where if it's not on RCBB, it's not a credit. That's no. I've disproven that. You can move past that. And if you're stuck still on that, that's the thing. It's sorry, that's
Yeah. No, I think we could shortcut this again, Bradley. I agree with you about fair credits and Olympia looping being one of the great examples of that. So again, I think we can shortcut this because I don't think I knew that you used Coaster-Account. I don't. If all the conversations we had, I didn't remember that, or maybe it never came up. I thought you were a spreadsheet guy. I was thinking you're Goldilocks and all that, but. Okay, so I get you mentioned earlier that not all of your credits are in Coaster-Account. I understand that. But roughly speaking, what is your count in Coaster-Account right now? Roughly, do you know what it is?
1,310, something like that.
And how many credits do you have total?
17.
Okay, so there's just
it's 99%, 99 point
Okay.
something percent.
And just to be clear, because again, and some of it's jokes. Adam Torres and we love joking with you. Okay. But just again, clearing the air. So none of these are things like relocations, repaintings, partial retracking, nothing like that.
Once you rode the track, I don't care. I won't count Ruger to Mantis. I've subtracted credits off my account when I found out they were relocations. The credits that I have on that aren't I have some really weird fair credits, 2 in Mexico, in like 2 and like really weird parts of the US. Now I have Gale Force. I wrote it like at the very beginning, and it's been completely retracted, I think, besides like the station. I counted that twice. Like it's like if you counted Incredible Hulk twice. Technically on Post account, the way it's put in their system, they don't count Incredible Hulk twice. I get counting that twice. So there's a few things, and then just so I don't have to look at, I do have the Mobius Loop Woodies listed as I rode both sides because I don't want to look at it. So I subtract those off and then add the others. So like
I see what you're saying. Okay,
but bottom line, big one that's on there is there's these railed, I guess they call them like railed zip lines, like in the coding on Coaster Count. A few of them I'll count, a few I won't. And like my deciding factor, I've had some people be like, "Oh, it depends on the seat." I don't care what the seat is. It could literally just be I hang from a rope. I'll still count that.
Right.
The lift mechanism, the way the ride gains momentum has to be mechanical, pretty much. Like if I walk up the lift hill, not a credit.
Count. Yeah,
even if it's a full circuit, it's coasting on rail. There's even an uphill section, not a credit if I had to walk, like to create the initial. Now it has a form of a motorized lift hill. Even if I can't ride the motorized lift hill because it's so weak, it couldn't hold, a human weight can just hold, the little whatever you want to call it on wheels. That's fine. It's still a full circuit. You don't ride the full circuit on Alpines. I've been on numerous Alpine coasters where you start at the top, you ride your way down, and you get off, and so they can have a much steeper lift hill. Dawson Duel at Belloir is a perfect example. You walk all the way up, you ride the Alpine coaster all the way down, get off at the bottom, and then the lift hill is significantly steeper than any other Alpine lift hill I can think of. But the reason it can do that is it's not lifting a human up, it's just lifting the cart up. That's still a credit.
Okay. And is that in Coaster Count?
Dawson Duel, yeah, because it's just listed as like a normal Alpine.
Okay, I haven't written that one. All right, so I think we've cleared the air. Coaster Count is 99% plus. So that says it right there. So, any listeners, if you're doubting, Bradley's not shortcut at anything. He's just, what he talked about earlier, his very efficient planning. And if you're curious to learn more about that, you can go to his Instagram, and we'll remind you again of how to get to that in actually just a couple minutes here. So we're just about done.
I'm also pretty open. Doesn't come up that often. But someone openly asked me a trip question, my DMs are open. If you want advice, I'm, for the most part, if I have experience on, would probably do. Maybe if you're asking, credits in China, I don't right now.
Right.
But I'll give you advice, and obviously I'll ask based off like what your experiences are, how you like to go about stuff, kind of curate. So I'm not giving you like exactly what I would do, but what I would do if I were in your shoes.
Yeah, which is probably more valuable anyway. Yeah. So, and again, we'll remind people again of how they can get to you and talk to you and get your information, which is awesome. So I'm sure some people are curious about doing that. But before we do that, the last general question we ask of all of our guests. Now, I get it that you don't have a conventional fear journey because you never really felt like you faced fear, but you understand our mission. We've talked about it a little bit here in the podcast. You've heard about it before because you've known David and I for a while now. So given the general, idea of facing fear, or the general idea of theme park therapy and theme parks and coasters bettering lives, can you maybe give, and you've given some good advice, some really good advice that I pointed out, a couple of different things you mentioned throughout the interview here, but any last words, any final words of wisdom, and maybe, this can be advice about making trips more efficient too. Any last words of wisdom in any of these types of things?
I mean, it's more summarizing. I mean, time is everything. So, you've got to use it correctly. It's, they're a cliche, live life to the fullest. You don't, I technically said I did, but at the end, it's like, no, because I use it when it makes sense. You don't have regrets, live life in the moment. You do have a fear of something. It's kind of the best way to tackle something is to run straight into the door head on when it comes to that stuff. than try to go backwards and go around it, because it's almost like that obstacle in life, it's smart enough, it's going to come back and rear its ugly head. You're not going to be able to avoid it forever. It's better to just deal with it, even if the outcome in the short term is going to suck. I'd rather get something out of the way and have short term pain than long term pain because I didn't deal with it, or long term, I guess, going back with you said, I have anxiety. If I left something undone, I would have anxiety about when it's going to rear its ugly head, or anxiety always being like, how am I going to eventually deal with this? If I just deal with it right then and there, the anxiety doesn't have time to even kick in.
Right. No, that's a good advice about getting something, you said ugly, out of the way. I believe in that too, because if it's something I don't want to deal with, if I get it done, I don't have to worry about it anymore. It's like I've got it behind me. And in fact, I take things a step further in my personal life, Bradley. If I get something like important done, may not be ugly or something I don't want to deal with, but some critical work, I do the kind of risk reward or work reward, I guess is a better way to put it. If I do something really important I need to get done, or like something I don't want to deal with and I get it done, I then reward myself. I play a video game, go to a park for a while. It's like, enjoy yourself, celebrate that you got that done, you got past that. So that's kind of another extension of what you just said. That's good advice.
And I guess another thing I'll add to all this, and if it hasn't been clear, and it's because I had, I kind of even had mapped out when I was at 100 to get to 1227, all that stuff. Creating itineraries well in advance. It never hurts. This should be basic advice for anyone, maybe unless you're listening to this and you're 4 years old. Okay, I understand that point on. Always have a plan. Like it doesn't hurt to brainstorm, even if you don't end up following through with that. There is a time and a place for flying by the seat of your pants and just having things, but because crazy positive things can happen. Sometimes you can't plan stuff out, but I like to have a plan. It's I like to live in both, where I'm not one of those like rigid people. I wake up every day at 8 a.m.
Right.
I take my this length shower. I only do this. I'm willing to go with you're willing to break out of your comfort zone, but have enough of a plan in place for everything. It's almost more contingency plans than true planning, I guess, as well. But
right.
Doing your homework, even once you're for the adults, even once you're done with school or stuff like that, it's really, really helpful. I taught myself everything I know about travel. My parents handed the keys over to me in 2016 for travel. I taught myself everything. I kind of used forums, Coaster Force, TPR. For individual parks, I might have DM'd someone who recently went, but for the most part, I just went in head first and did it. And that's sometimes the best way to do something is you just gotta go in and do it, even if it seems scary and difficult and you don't know what you're doing. It's the only way you're going to learn to do something is doing it yourself.
Right, that's a good point, and I do want to just unpack something briefly. Not that last thing, but the thing before that you said, which was talking about having plans and so forth. There are times in life, like as you alluded to, where it's fine. It may not be advantageous, but it can be fine or work out fine to be spontaneous and appropriate to be spontaneous, and give me stories and memories that are great because you were spontaneous. But in terms of, and maybe this, I think this is what you were alluding to, Bradley, planning trips. Like if you're going to want to go for 175 credits in 2 weeks, for example, you're going to want to have a plan. You're going to need to have a plan. And even furthermore, like you were talking about, the epic trip that, not your first trip to Europe, but the trip that you did with Mark, Austin, and Justin, we talked about earlier in 2021, having a plan B, having, especially, or maybe not for the whole trip, but for certain parts of it where
segments with the plans I had. Plan, okay, if Sweden's open, this is the plan. If Sweden's not open, this is the plan. Pretty much there were certain countries I built plans around that were easy countries that, pretty much the countries that didn't directly like border multiple countries. I had planned if that country isn't open, we can easily cut that country out. What do we? Oh, we have 2 extra days. Okay, this is what at least makes sense as the best thing to do with those 2 extra days.
Right. And the advice I would give, I mean, that's one flavor. That's great. And the other flavor I would give is when you're planning a trip, like some complex something, which a trip is, especially these couple of week trips we're talking about, complex, look at it and think about, okay, well, these three parts of the trip are probably the riskiest for whatever reason. So have a plan B, at least for those if you don't have for the entire trip. The other is sometimes you have to come up with a plan B in the moment, because maybe those three things you planned a plan B for, they went fine, but something else went afoul and you didn't have a plan B for it in advance. That's okay. The important thing in that case is when that whatever it is goes afoul and it becomes a problem, focus on the plan B then. Remain calm, just take things, just understand that life sometimes happens. Don't panic. Don't get all cranky and upset. Just remain calm and just, this modern age we live in, you've got the internet. You can reach out to people, friends, maybe you can reach out to Bradley if he's available, and just do the best you can. And, if it doesn't work out and you don't get 175 credits, you get 150, 160. It's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. This is not work we're talking about. This is just fun stuff. Remember, at the end of the day, this is all just fun.
Well, so you want, like, when I get fully in, like the true trips, and these are the crazy tips that, like, these might actually be the most helpful if you want to attempt what I do. So this should hopefully stick in a few people's head. Every minute you wasted the first hour a park is open, I relate to 5 minutes you wasted overall.
Because
the first hour is
crowded.
Extremely important.
Yeah, because
I don't, no matter what, I don't stop for bathroom breaks. I don't look at gifts. I don't look at my on-ride photo. I don't stop for food. I don't stop for anything when I'm like in go mood. But people won't believe this. I've never purchased a fast pass ever.
Right. That's a good point. I never think about asking about that. Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, because I know you're very, I want to say you're cheap. You're thrifty. You're thrifty. Yeah. I think is a good way to put it. Yeah. All right. The last thing I want to ask you.
The Cosmo Fast Pass is another park I could have gone to instead.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about a lot of things here. Had a long conversation. So Bradley, last thing, kind of already did this a little bit, but let's just do that. You kind of go through it again. Any other things you want to mention in terms of where people can find you? If you have a website, social media where they can connect with you, perhaps even reach out to you, or at least see, like you said, your highlights and, your tips you already just put out there for everyone, just go ahead and share away.
I guess it's really the same. If you look me up on Facebook, it's obviously just Bradley Edholm. And then it's B Edholm with the _. On Instagram. I guess if you really wanted to reach out to me, like, I guess go through those, but if you wanted more personal, like, I would just go through my DMs. I guess if you wanted to message me and like play Xbox with me, stuff like that, sure. But really, if you're gonna reach out, it's my Instagram and Facebook. Any other way you could get in touch with me would be via those anyways. But yeah, it's just those two. It's never going to click for me to be like a YouTube person or anything like that. Because I don't know, for me, it takes away from the enjoyment of being at parks. Like when I'm at a park, I just want to ride rides. I don't want to think about anything else. So creating content, taking pictures, it takes away. It's already enough for me to take one photo per credit, just be like, oh, I rode this coaster. Many times I've forgotten, and it's just because it happens. Humans forget, and it's not my first and foremost, something I think about. And I respect and I appreciate the people who, they've made, big enough YouTube channels and stuff. That's their livelihood, or, it's Christopher fun money. I get it. It doesn't click for me. So it's just Instagram, Facebook, basic. That's the best way to reach me.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I've done some video recording in parks, like when I went on my China trip, but that was back when Coaster Challenge was still a video format, YouTube format. And I'll be honest, in a way, I'm glad we switched to podcasting because it was a lot of work. it did, like you said, Bradley, it took away a lot of my time at the parks. And I was just like, oh gosh, I need to get this video. I want to get this shot. I want to get this shot. And I screwed up that shot. I got to do it again. I got to wait for the train to come around. And I'm like, I want to go ride some more. So it's kind of in conflict with what I really want to do. So, but, again, I wasn't doing it for a living. Coaster Challenge, we are nonprofits. None of us make any money from this. In fact, we put our own money into Coaster Challenge. We still do. But, those that make a living, some of our friends we talked about here during this interview, that's what they do. Especially Austin, Amusement Insider does a great job with that. Amazing videos. And he has to put a lot of work in. And that includes when he goes to parks for the first time, he has to have that, not conflict, but he has to have both of those things. He wants to ride, but he's got to get those videos. So I respect that a lot because he doesn't ride as much as he'd like to because of that, but he earns a living from it too. So anyways, thank you, Bradley, for sharing where people can find you. I encourage people to connect with Bradley. Yes, he has his controversial opinions. It's just because he's being honest, but he's a really nice guy. Hopefully you saw that from the interview here. He won't bite. So feel free to reach out to him.
Unless you want me to bite or you make sure.
But, and you talked about time being such a valuable resource, which I agree with, Bradley. Thank you for giving your time here today for this interview, for taking, time away from everything else in life. So I appreciate you sharing the words of wisdom and your stories. It's been really entertaining. So thanks again, Bradley.
Yeah, thank you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. If you want to see more of us, we upload every Friday. Be sure to like us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. All at Coaster Challenge. Links are in the description below. Thanks for joining us here today.